the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
The Chancellor says Britain must face into the storm as he prepares to unveil the biggest package of tax rises and cuts for a decade.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 17th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Jeremy Hunt will lay out £54 billion of tax rises and spending cuts as he presents his autumn statement this morning. He'll tell the Commons that difficult decisions will be made, but they will be based on compassion.
The package is predicted to cause unrest, especially amongst those Tory MPs who supported Liz Truss's short-term growth agenda. We'll bring you analysis of that statement throughout the morning.
In other news, the head of MI5 has revealed that security services have foiled at least 10 attempts by Iran to kidnap or kill British citizens in the UK. The news comes just days before England are due to play the Islamic Republic in the World Cup.
And in a major breakthrough, a key gene that increases the risk of Alzheimer's has been identified by researchers. We're going to talk to a dementia expert to see if finally a cure could be on the horizon.
Wouldn't that be the most amazing game changer?
Fabulous.
So many of us
Really
touched
would.
by that.
Yeah.
Get in touch on any of the topics we're covering this morning. Of course, big day in Westminster, but it will affect all of us. What do you want to see in the budget today from the Chancellor? Let us know your thoughts. You can get in touch on Twitter or via email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, a very good morning to you. Our top story this morning, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, will present his autumn statement to the House of Commons this morning, telling MPs Britain must face into the storm as he unveils a £54 billion package of spending cuts and tax rises.
And among those headline pledges expected in the statement are a lowering of the threshold for the 45p tax rate and a raising of the energy price cap to £3,000.
Well, the Chancellor is expected to say that difficult decisions will have to be made and that the wealthiest must bear the heaviest load.
Let's get reaction now from the Chief Economist at Pamela Gordon, Simon French, and the Deputy Editor of CapX, Alice Denby.
To you first of all then, Simon, look, a little bit of face saving needs to happen, doesn't it, today? The eyes of the world will be on Parliament as the Chancellor steps up to the dispatch box. What do the markets need to see and what can be done to make sure that as we head into recession, we don't make things worse?
Yes, so in terms of what the markets need to see, actually, to some extent, it's continuity of what they've seen since early October. So mortgages were expected to rise, did rise very aggressively off the back of the mini-budget. Broader lending rates for the government, based on international investors' assessment of how creditworthy the UK was, were at a really quite unpleasantly high level. They've come down since Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak haven't actually done an awful lot, but have just kind of said the right things in terms of indicating the detail of what would come today. Now, to your second part of your question, how do they ensure that things don't get worse? Today is about buying the government time to hope that events outside their control in international energy markets improve. A lot of the pain we'll hear in terms of tax increases and spending cuts will come from 2025 onwards. Now, the cynics amongst us, I'm sure there are none in this room, would say, well, that's in a new parliament. It might be potentially Sir Keir Starmer's problem rather than Rishi Sunak's problem. But they are hoping that the events that have generated this huge cost of living squeeze, principally in energy markets, get better over the next 2 years. So actually, when we come to budgets in 2 years' time, some of those difficult decisions may potentially be U-turned again.
So if they are going to raise tax thresholds and take a lot more people into the 40p tax rate, a lot more people into the top 45p tax rate, are you saying that won't happen, though, until 2025?
Probably won't happen till that point. The reason I say that is...
Which is after a general election.
Yes, I mean, there's a delicate balancing act here. Financial markets are prepared to give the government the benefit of the doubt that it needs to manage the economic cycle, and the economic cycle is slowing. We're almost certainly now in a recession, and therefore the government has to say it has what you'll hear a lot about today is medium-term plans, medium-term debt falling as a percentage of the economy. That is the rule which Rishi Sunak is expected to adhere to. And that medium term is normally 3 to 5 years. Now, I'm not saying for certain we won't get those tax changes kicking in today, but almost to the first question around how we don't ensure that things are getting worse, actually, by delaying it a couple of years, you're hoping that the most acute cost of living squeeze is over by the time that inevitable pain comes.
So essentially what you're talking about is some of the worst elements of it might be backloaded, as it were, a little bit further down the road. And yet we're hearing this phrase being bandied around about kitchen sinking this budget. Just explain what that means. It's kind of corporate speak. So although they might be making all these painful announcements now, they might be able to make nicer ones later on, even though the pain's yet to come down the road. Yeah,
so many of your viewers who are familiar with the way that the corporate world works rather than the government world works. A lot of finance directors, chief executives who come into a company afresh, they instruct their management teams to kitchen sink all the bad news, such that they're then upgrading estimates, making things not just sound better, but actually their financial data improving quarter on quarter, year on year. That's pretty well understood in the city and across the private sector. I suspect the government will take the same approach because it has one eye on an election at the end of 2025, potentially where it wants the news cycle to be getting progressively better. There are warnings from history, though. John Major had a rapidly improving economy in the mid-90s. He got no reward in 1997. George H.W. Bush in the United States, recovery from the early 90s recession, but by 1992, Bill Clinton already had the momentum. He lost that election. So it's an election strategy. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll work.
On gas, can I just ask you on energy?
Yeah.
Because this is the bulk of what he's going to be confirming today.
Yeah.
Gas prices are falling on the international wholesale markets. So can you explain why we don't get the benefit of that for quite some time?
So the delivery right now and over the next month or so is at a very, very low level. And actually, if we were just talking about providing gas to UK households in November and early December, we would be getting the reward instantaneously. But the energy companies need to assure forward buy for the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And those prices haven't come down nearly as much because the shipments of liquefied natural gas from around the world are providing a glut now, but we don't necessarily have the storage to keep those for the next 18 months. So the price remains high, and the reality, therefore, is that when we're looking at what the energy price guarantee will be that Jeremy Hunt will unveil today, talks of £3,000 rather than £2,500, is a reflection of what is going on the latter part of the energy curve, not the front end of the curve, where you're right, prices have come down a long way.
OK. Well, let's bring in Alice Denby in all of this, because that's the kind of the economics of it and what we can expect. But obviously a lot of politics at play, and they have to appease certain wings within their own party. We've also already seen quite vocal opposition to some of the ground laying that the Chancellor has been doing, from Esther McVey, for example, in the Commons yesterday. How much of a difficult path is the Chancellor treading politically today, do you think?
I think the difficulty the Chancellor has here is that a different Prime Minister a couple of months ago was saying that we were in a position to be cutting taxes. So people are rightly going to ask, well, is this a political choice you're making, or is it your party that has made the situation so much worse? And if you look at the polling, many voters blame the Conservatives for this hole we're in, and people are going to be looking at this government and saying, well, you're making me poorer.
I just want to ask Simon on that point, because the OBR are going to be publishing their analysis at around 2 p.m. today, which will be absolutely crucial, because up till now we don't really know how big this black hole is. But on current estimates, how much of this black hole is attributable directly, do you think, to Trustonomics? I've read estimates of around 30 billion.
I would say smaller than that, actually. If we'd been having this conversation, and we did a few weeks ago, the number today, which is probably going to be 50 to 55 billion, would probably have been about 75 billion. So it's come down by 20 billion. But the additionality versus what it would be if Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng hadn't unveiled the budget, relatively small. I would suggest somewhat lower than that. And this is just, if you like, a reflection of events in energy markets around the world have led to these difficult decisions, plus also the blowback it has on the growth of the economy. The economy, if you take the Bank of England's assessment, is going to shrink for the next 8 quarters for 2 years. That makes that medium-term debt rule we were talking about, debt as a proportion of the economy. If you get that ratio, if you get the size of the economy falling, debt needs to come down even further. So it's really the degradation in growth that is doing a lot of this driving force, rather than the events of late September.
I mean, you're going to get the Office of Budget Responsibility report, a lot of controversy that they weren't involved in that Trust mini-budget. They thought they were being very clever, didn't they? Call it a fiscal statement. We don't need the OBR.
Yeah.
How much importance does the city to the markets attached to what the OBR will say at 2 o'clock this afternoon?
So I'm really pleased you asked me this question, because the OBR will be wrong. The Bank of England will be wrong.
Glad you said that.
I will be wrong. You'll be wrong.
Right.
Economic forecasts are always wrong.
Yes.
But famous US economist J.K. Galbraith said, all economic forecasts are wrong, but some of them are useful.
Right.
And that is the important thing for your viewers to remember, is that the institutional signalling of getting the Office for Budget Responsibility to model this stuff, even though it will be wrong, is important for financial markets, because it suggests that you are prepared to have your homework marked. And that is an important signalling device for people who are looking at the real strength. The government bans around this phrase of the UK being world-leading on almost everything. But what it is world-leading on, and this is really important, is the institutional checks and balances we have. Judiciary, rule of law, the independent institutions. You start to degrade those, and the UK becomes a less attractive investment destination.
OK. Alice, back to you in all of this. Lots of people calling it austerity 2.0. Is this going to be the way that, I suppose, lots of people see Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak from here on out? Some people calling them the Doom Brothers. I mean, they've got an unenviable task in trying to sell austerity 2.0, haven't they?
Yeah, and as I say, I think they're going to be keen to talk about how this is caused by global factors. It's Putin, it's energy prices. But are people at the next election going to give them credit for that? Or are they going to say, well, you've been in power for 12 years and I'm coming into an election in a worse financial position than I was 5 years ago? And I also feel like he's going to try his best to make sure that these tax rises fall on the wealthiest people. But he's also doing it in this kind of stealthy way by, say, freezing the thresholds, which does drag a lot more people into, and lower earners into paying higher taxes. And then there's this kind of giving with one hand and taking with the other, so rumours are he's going to raise the living wage. Well, fine, but then if you're paying more tax on a lower income, it's not going to help. So I think the political balancing act here is really difficult. But as Simon says, I think he's going to try his best to make sure a lot of those consequences are felt further down the line rather than immediately. So he's hoping, as you say, that the spending cuts won't have to actually happen. They'll just have to be signalled at to give the markets confidence.
We should say, Simon, as well, we're not in splendid isolation here, are we? Economies across the world are having exactly the same problems. Inflation, problems with food prices. And how do we compare? We've got inflation now at over 11%, highest for 40 years.
Yep.
Is that especially high for Europe or America, United States?
No, not really. The UK is middle of the pack. Once you start to adjust for energy composition, and so much of this is driven by particularly exposure to gas in the energy mix, the UK is modestly higher in terms of its headline inflation rate. But across Europe, you see higher inflation rates in the Netherlands and Spain. There are comparable countries where inflation rates are higher. The question really is whether, as it comes down at the pace that passes through that benefit to consumers so they feel better off in real terms. You're starting to see that come down very rapidly in the United States because, if you like, they let inflation rip. By putting in the energy price guarantee, the energy price cap, you are moving the pain slightly to the right or later on. But that also may mean that the pain goes on a little bit longer. So you help people in the short term, but actually the benefit, and you mentioned 5 minutes ago, the falling gas price, comes later for individuals. It's a delicate balancing act, but actually so much of this is global. This is the element that I do have some sympathy with the government, where they're trying to make the case that the UK is not unique in the challenges.
The Chancellor at the weekend saying the USA is raising taxes by $800 billion. There's higher inflation in the Eurozone in countries like Germany and Italy. And Germany is predicting a bigger fall in GDP than we are here in the UK. Simon and Alice, thank you both very much for all of your analysis, and I really appreciate that. 6 a.m. It's a very high-level, detailed economic discussion there.
It's going to be a long day.
Now, one of the groups who look set to benefit from today's statement are those who are on pensions.
Our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, he's been to Barnstable in Devon to ask pensioners what they hope to hear from the Chancellor this morning.
The great and the good of Barnstable gathered together for a coffee, a moan, and the chance to keep warm. Tough times. But what's toughest?
The food. You go in the supermarkets or anywhere one day, it's at one price, and you go in there the next day, it's going up. You just got to buy the cheapest things you can find. We don't get much. If the government lived on our pension, they'd be dead within a week. Lack of food.
Not surprisingly, it reminds them of the war.
Women cooked more. You didn't have the frozen stuff that you've got now. I mean, mums are working now, so they buy the frozen stuff because they've got to go to work, so they want something that's quick to cook when they come home. And times have changed, haven't they?
But who do they blame?
And once it was COVID, they were blaming COVID. Now it's the Ukraine war they're blaming.
Who do you blame?
The government. Yeah.
There's as many different viewpoints here as there are biscuits, but a common theme picked up by age concern across a myriad of coffee mornings and events: mental health.
They're getting very anxious, and of course, with a lot of older people, they are concerned for their children and of course their grandchildren, because they actually are finding financial difficulties. And if older people have a bit of money, they are looking at helping their families.
There's a stoicism too, a sense of keeping calm and getting on with it.
If I start noticing it and being affected by it, we are in deep, deep, deep trouble. Do I think they're efficient? Well, put it this way, I think probably the best I can say is they're doing their best.
These people have a list of hopes for today's fiscal statement: hopes for pensions, hopes for inflation, but most of all, a hope that once a plan is in place, we can look forward with confidence.
There's so much negativity around. I shall die of negativity. I'm struggling with, I've got that at home. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change.
Serenity, wisdom and courage, three qualities these pensioners have in spades. And with these traits, they say, they can survive whatever the Chancellor throws at them today and face the future with renewed confidence. Jeff Moody, GB News.
With the time at 6:17, let's bring you up to date with the rest of this morning's headlines.
The head of MI5 has revealed that Iran has made at least 10 attempts to kidnap or kill British citizens on British soil. Giving his annual threat update yesterday, he also warned that Britain should be prepared for Russian aggression for years to come.
In the US, the Republican Party have won a narrow majority in the House of Representatives. It follows midterm elections that many expected to be a so-called red wave, but was far less damaging for the Democrats than expected.
And the Met Office has issued 3 yellow warnings for large parts of the UK until Friday as the country faces atrocious weather conditions. Motorists are being warned to stay off the roads, with some cars getting stuck in floodwater. And we've still got...
It was biblical rain yesterday in London. I had to go and pick up the kids in welly boots from school. It was ridiculous.
My garden is just a puddle.
Yeah.
But it is mad, isn't it, that we've still got a hosepipe ban?
Why is that? Why are we unable to retain the water? Is it because it's been so dry?
Well, that's the usual excuse from the water companies, but isn't it because they just don't invest enough in new sewers, and the ones they've got are porous? It's like Gorgonzola cheese, it just goes straight through.
Yeah, it shouldn't be so hard in this country,
No.
should it? But we should all have water buttresses and try and save some of the water ourselves if we want to use our hose pipes, because they're going to have bans on them more and more, I think.
I know, but I've still been using my little watering can.
Can't admit to that.
I think the watering can's just...
It's OK from the kitchen sink. It's fine. Yeah,
exactly.
it's totally fine. I spotted this story in the Mirror which made me giggle this morning. I don't know if you've seen it. There's some funny pictures inside where there are grown men and women hugging full-size teddy bears. I hope we can show you the picture. Here we go. Adult teddies are making life a bit more bearable as we're all facing the cost of living crisis. Apparently they are the #1 Christmas idea as a gift. What do you think about this?
I don't want one.
It's quite weird,
please
isn't
don't
it?
invest in that. Why can't you cuddle up to your partner?
Well, maybe it's because of increasing single households.
Maybe, yeah.
It's better than a blow-up doll, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe there are virtues to blow-up doll.
A 5'7" man bear replaces the need for a physical presence weighing in at 3.2 kg.
How much does that cost?
Oh, I actually don't know what that costs, but I'd imagine it's expensive.
Yeah, and
soft toys are expensive. The little ones, they've got Jelly Cats, this brand that little ones like when they're in buggies, they're like 20 quid for one of this
if
size.
you've got 2 cats like I've got, that man-sized teddy bear would be a goner.
They'd chew it.
They'd tear it apart.
Well, let us know at home. Would you like a man-sized teddy bear for Christmas, or do you think it's all a bit weird? Let us know your thoughts on anything we're discussing this morning. Indeed, let's send in your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
After the break, we're going to find out how the autumn statement is going to affect the already struggling pub industry, and they've had a tough time. But first, the weather.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. A bit of a wet and windy one for much of the country. We do have Met Office yellow warnings in place, but brighter skies across parts of the south where we should see at least a little bit of sunshine. This area of low pressure brought wet and windy weather for many overnight. It's now heading out into the North Sea, but it's going to kind of curve back round and stick around across northern England and Scotland for much of the day. That rain also affecting much of the Midlands and parts of Wales. We do have Met Office warnings in place. Foggy start across parts of Northern Ireland, and a cold start here as well, with temperatures below freezing. The rain will edge into the east of Northern Ireland through the day, and it's going to pep up across eastern Scotland with that wind just coming in from the North Sea. It's going to feel pretty grim. 9, 10, 11 at best, and feeling colder with some sunny spells in the south. Could get up into the teens. We will see a few blustery showers across Devon and Cornwall through the day, but much of South Wales and southern England should be dry. Elsewhere, we'll keep the outbreaks of rain, perhaps easing over northern England and parts of the Midlands into this evening, but that rain is sticking around in eastern Scotland. So again, Met Office yellow warning in place here. That's in place for most of Friday as well. Perhaps not quite as cold as last night across Northern Ireland, but still with some clearer skies across the south. Temperatures well down into single figures. Well, we've got the cloud and the rain. Temperatures won't really drop too much overnight, but it will make for another pretty grey day tomorrow across eastern Scotland. Again, further pulses of rain could cause some disruption. We may see by the end of Friday more than 100 millimetres of rain on the hills and mountains in eastern Scotland. So as I said, that could cause a bit of disruption. A drier day for northeast England, the Midlands, North Wales with some sunny spells. And again in the south, we might squeak up to 13 Celsius. Just a few showers again for Devon and Cornwall. So plenty going on over the next couple of days. Saturday starts chilly. At the moment, most places look dry and bright, but it will turn wet again from the west and that'll rain will last into Saturday night.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back at 6:24. Still to come on the programme this morning. At 6:45, we'll be asking, could new treatments for Alzheimer's be on the way? We'll be speaking to a dementia expert. This is after scientists have identified a gene which actually increases your risk of the disease. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, fascinating. My father had Alzheimer's.
Did he? And my granny as well.
It's
really sad.
It's sad and it's tough, so let's hope that this is a breakthrough. And also, male fertility has halved since 1970, according to new research, with Africa and East Asia seeing fertility declines for the first time. At 7:45, we'll be discussing if the future of humanity could be at risk. We need to see it. Don't we need to see a fall in population?
Yeah, for that to be a fact. Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah, let us know your thoughts on all of those topics. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Like many in business, landlords and pub owners will be closely watching the Chancellor's autumn statement today, hoping the squeeze on their industry isn't too tight.
Well, 50 pubs close every month, according to the British Beer and Pub Association. And our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, has more on this story now for us from Derbyshire.
We'll get back to the site, mate. We'll backfill that trench.
Like many builders in Belper, Joe's partial to a pint after a hard day's work. But now the cost of living is squeezing his social life.
I've just been to the bar, got my friend one. It was £9 for 2 pints. You know, you should get 4 pints for that back in the day. So it's double the price in my eyes. I don't understand how people can afford to even go out and have a drink if you're not earning good money at the minute.
At the Devonshire, pairing good food with great beer has meant success for Martin, who owns 4 pubs in Derbyshire. But now he's facing rising prices across the business.
Just had a price increase notification from Heineken that there's going to be a 13% increase in March next year, and obviously, you know, we can't absorb any more, and that will be passed on. So, you know, you're talking probably something like, you know, another 20p on a pint in the new year, which we've had to do earlier this year already.
Costs are increasing everywhere, including the price of a pint in most pubs. That means fewer people are coming into places like this, and when they do, they're spending less of their money. It's an industry in decline. The Lord Nelson across the road closed a decade ago. Now 50 pubs shut every month, according to the British Beer and Pub Association. With the Chancellor's autumn statement due, the industry is once again poised to be pinched. Last month, Jeremy Hunt ditched a freeze in alcohol duty rates, which would have saved the industry £600 million in tax. Industry leaders want him to reconsider, but there's a £55 billion hole in the government's finances, and the Chancellor's filling it with tax rises and cuts to public spending. Back in the Devonshire, Martin says no matter the outlook, pubs still need some help.
A cut in VAT would allow us to retain some more profit. Money would stick on a bit better. I think we're all going to have to take a little bit of pain. That's the consumer, the business owners, right across the board. But I'm just hoping that it's not too severe.
The tax rises and spending cuts are coming, but it's unknown if they'll heal or only widen the financial wounds in British pubs. Will Hollis for GB News in Belper.
Right, stay with us after the break. We'll be going through the papers this morning. We're joined by Baroness Claire Fox and Liam Halligan. See you in a sec.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well, welcome back. Time is 6:30. Let's bring you up to date with today's top stories.
The Chancellor is to deliver the government's plan for stability and growth in today's autumn statement. Jeremy Hunt will unveil a £54 billion package of tax hikes and spending cuts. He'll say the priority will be on protecting the vulnerable, but will also warn that difficult decisions will have to be made to balance the UK's books.
And 1 in 4 employers have seen an increase in staff being off sick compared to last year. That's according to new research. A rise in flu and COVID cases, as well as the ongoing impact of long COVID, are listed as some of the reasons for that rise.
The NSPCC has warned that children face an increased risk of domestic abuse during the World Cup. The charity says that emotional stress, alcohol and betting on games could be triggers to incidents at home during the tournament.
We like this bit.
We do, it's our favourite.
Time to go through the papers with our very own economics and business editor, the formidable Liam Halligan.
Good morning.
And director of think tank, the Academy of Ideas, Baroness Claire Fox, my favourite Baroness. Well, I say that to all Baronesses, but you know I like you, Claire.
So, should we kick off, Liam? Big day for the country, big day for the Chancellor, big day for you. Front page of the Telegraph, we will face into the storm, says Hunt, as taxes surge.
It's a lot of this sort of austerity rhetoric. It's going to be rough, it's going to hurt. We're going to face into the storm. There is going to be a big rise in taxation today, Isabel, even though the tax burden, the share of tax as a percentage of our entire economy is already at a 70-year high. It's already up where it was during the immediate post-war period under Clem Attlee's Labour Party and Britain's New Jerusalem. I think a lot of people are going to be wondering, yes, we took a bit of a reputational hit after the mini-budget and Truss and Kwarteng overdid it a little bit, but should we really be steeply raising taxes into a recession when there's a cost of living crisis, when borrowing costs are going up for firms and households across the country? And I think even though Jeremy Hunt's saying we have to restore Britain's reputation for fiscal prudence, we also have to restore Britain's reputation for common sense. And this may not pass the sort of common sense sniff test with an awful lot of small business owners, with an awful lot of households hard-pressed trying to make ends meet. I don't think there are going to be big headline tax rate increases today. What there will be is what we call stealth taxes, freezing tax thresholds, keeping allowances where they are even though inflation is going up, dragging more people into higher tax brackets. It is going to hurt.
Isn't that what gives politicians a bad name?
Yeah.
People think it's just so cynical. There'll be a couple of white rabbits out the hats, won't there, Liam? But underneath, in the detail in the Red Book, thresholds being frozen. So people perhaps who are now on are going to be dragged into the 40p tax rate.
Yeah.
Far more going to be dragged into the 45p tax rate. If you're only 125,000, does that make you super rich? Apparently it's going to.
Well, if you're a sort of mid-ranking teacher or nurse, soon you're going to be paying top-rate tax.
Yeah.
Top-rate tax was never meant for, with all due respect, those kind of middle-of-the-road, middle-earning people. If you're going to pass on an average-price home to your kids now, you're going to be stung with inheritance tax, a threshold that's stayed where it is since 2009 at 325 grand and is probably now going to be extended, that threshold, to 2028. I do agree with you, Andrew. Politicians should level with the public. If we need more taxation, say we do, and raise the headline rate of tax. And also, weeks and weeks now of this spin from the Downing Street and the Treasury, it's going to be really, really tough. So when it's a bit less bad, the clever young people in Downing Street think they've pulled the wool over our eyes by making it feel not quite as bad because of all the ghastly rhetoric. No other country announces its fiscal policies like this. It's crazy.
That's interesting. It's so depressing, isn't it, for taxpayers? I mean, we already know that our public services are really creaking as a result of the pandemic, everything else that's going on. We're going to see those affected really badly by the announcements today. We're all going to pay more in tax and yet get less for it because our services are going to be in a worse state. It's no return on what we're paying.
7 million people on an NHS waiting list. Of course, we would all agree that a lot of our NHS workers do a really good job. But if we, a few minutes on Google looking at respectable news sources and academic sources, and you can quickly see that even though the NHS is funded pretty much as well as any health system in the world, the clinical outcomes for stroke, for heart disease, for oncology, cancer and so on are well down the international rankings. So it's not as if we've got world-class public services, but we are going to get a lot more tax. And my concern is one of timing. We know the economy is stalled. It's probably already in recession, given those GDP growth figures last week showing negative growth between July and September. We know borrowing costs are going up. We know an awful lot of small businesses were hammered during lockdown, and now they're going to face a 6p increase in corporation tax, wiping out their margin for a lot of them. I can't see how a package, as we've been presented with, can generate growth and economic expansion and economic prosperity. And without growth and economic expansion, whatever you say about the Truss-Kwarteng budget, without those things, then the fiscal situation can only get worse.
Gosh, that's depressing.
It is all a bit
depressing. Let's go to the Baroness.
Well, I wanted to pick up, actually, on that last point, because I think that the worst thing about this whole atmosphere in the statement today is that it's utterly devoid of any future-orientated hope of ensuring that the economy changes. And Liam's just made a very important point, which is that it's one thing suggesting that growth was, discredited under the very brief Kwarteng Liz Truss period. But if you've got an economy that's not growing, then basically you're talking about forever austerity. and forever having, you know, to use that, the same cake, you know, and kind of mean-spirited atmosphere. So what I can't stand about today's announcement is that there's no, in any way, a commitment to productivity increases, to any sense that at some point the economic situation might change. There's no real feeling that there's a vision for the economy. It's all cut, the slow drip of pain. This is hardly an inspiring thought, really, is it? And then they'll say, well, not everyone will suffer quite as badly as we thought.
Because they'll put the living wage up.
And I just the only other thing I wanted to pick up on, particularly on what Liam said, is that I think that people would be prepared to pay more taxes if it meant that they felt that they were, for example, going to get an increased form of service.
Well, that's...
Right?
Yeah.
Now, you know, you sort of think, well, you know, I think I might pay more taxes if I thought that there was going to be, for example, more social housing built. If I thought that I mean, you know, I think there's a housing crisis. We're going to go on and talk about that. If I thought, well, you know, I don't mind doing that, right? But, of course, you feel as though you're paying more taxes...
Getting
and
worse
actually,
service.
nothing is going to improve in the services. The government are going to announce that they're going to give more to the health service, and I think a lot of people just feel that's good money after bad, right? That it doesn't matter how much money's going in if you've got a health service that's basically rotten in terms of the way it's organised at the core. So, in some ways, being asked to be fiscally responsible, which is not our job, by the way, as citizens. The government's saying, well, we've got to behave well. There's nothing in here that inspires people to think it's worth making these sacrifices.
And do you think, I don't know, anecdotally, and this could just be amongst my circle of friends, but I'm hearing a lot of people sort of bracing themselves for this increase in taxes and thinking, I'm going to go abroad. You know, I don't know if anecdotally you're hearing the same sort of thing, but...
I have children of you know, young adult age now. A lot of them are talking about going abroad. You know, I remember growing up in London in the early 80s in a working class home. You know, everybody in my family, my extended family, they were working in the building trade and so on. And a lot of people left. A lot of people went to Canada, Australia, America, New Zealand, because there was just more work. And it feels, and there was very, very high taxation. And it's feeling a bit like that to me now. Look, we're an amazing country. We have tremendous entrepreneurs in this country. We have brilliant technology. We have brilliant universities. There is an awful lot that we can shout and scream about. And what we need at the moment, instead of this endless, ridiculous, clever spin on the front of newspapers, which monsters business deals, which destroys business sentiment. The people doing this are mad, in my view. This endless spin about it's going to be really, really bad, just so they can feel they get a better PR hit today. When you've got this, we don't need that. We need hope and uplift, and we need to be encouraging businesses and entrepreneurs to keep going, not to throw the towel in, to keep employing people, to keep investing.
And it'll be interesting on that, won't it, whether we see, again, below the radar, government cutting grants for research and development, which is so important for the future, and low-hanging fruit, easy to chop off, and it would send a very bad signal.
We need tax breaks for business, entrepreneurship and investment, not for the big business high rollers that make endless party donations to lots of the parties, but to small, what we call SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, Andrew. We also need to get out beyond this sense that the only way to be a successful economy is to tax more. Where does that end? I completely agree with Claire. There is a market out there for a bit more tax, particularly for the better off, for much better public services. But that doesn't mean for more middle managers and more diversity officers and more, you know, in some cases, very big gold-plated pensions for public sector workers. A fifth of people work in the public sector, and some of them do a fine job. But what about the 4/5 of us who work in the private sector, many of whom won't get a pay rise at all? And as for the minimum wage increase, it's a nice headline for the government. Who's going to pay for that? Ordinary firms.
Exactly, but also the point that you've just made, Andrew, which is very important, is that we've got to see things like R&D increasing.
Exactly.
Right? So what you'd really like is, that's why I'm saying is, there's nothing in this budget that says, but actually, we're planning for the long term. So they're kicking things down the road till 2025 in many instances, but there's no sense of vision. So you'd say, we need more research and development. We need to actually think about productivity increases. bringing in new technology, exciting developments. You know, levelling up doesn't have to be nice to the north and have a nice new bridge, right, or whatever. It can be, let's have a new industrial revolution in the future. We'll at least start to do that.
But
None of that.
But it's not long-term, it's short-term, and we know what the short-term here is, the election at the end of 2024.
That's the problem. Politics,
that's what it's all about.
That's the big theme over, you know, the ultimate cleverness. Let's put taxes up now so we can then cut them into the next election. That's playing politics with businesses and families that are trying to make ends meet.
And I'm just looking at the Telegraph today, you guys. They're looking at some waste in the public sector. So £6 billion wasted on a tank project. £6 billion wasted. Where's the accountability?
That's a penny on income tax.
Exactly. And they spent £7,000 on a luxury villa for civil servants. It's just unbelievable.
What?
It's our
Why
money.
do they need a luxury villa?
And architectural plans on HS2, £105 million, down the drain. And why does Number 10 need Fortnum and Mason deliveries for £11,000?
Well, that was Esther McVeigh.
Esther McVeigh of this parish.
Just yesterday, she said in the Commons that she won't vote through this budget. I don't think there's any chance that the government will lose its budget, but we'll see. It depends how bad these bad, in inverted commas, or ill-judged these tax cuts are. But Esther McVeigh, of course, GB News presenter, she said that unless HS2 is scrapped, and the bill's going to be a lot more than it's going to be more like 150 billion quid to take 20 minutes off London to Birmingham. We don't even know if we're going to get the bit from Birmingham to Manchester, the bit that really counts.
I know.
The bit that really makes added value.
They should have gone from Birmingham to Manchester first.
Absolutely. And they should really be doing Liverpool to Hull. That's where you get the bang for your buck.
One of the things, I mean, in lots of the papers, they're doing two stories that relate to this, which is, first of all, that councils, I mean, this Yorkshire council that's basically saying second home taxes is going up. So I'd be interested to hear what Liam Halligan thinks, because this idea that we're going to do you on second homes and that's going to solve the housing crisis. I mean, again, an attack on aspiration. Not all second home owners are kind of like rich. In fact, one of the examples... No, you're not allowed. But one of the people that gave an example was somebody who'd bought a second home for somebody to care for their father who's got Alzheimer's. You know, it's more complicated than the kind of... So it's kind of cheap rhetoric. Actually, no houses created by this at all. What about building some houses instead of kind of penalising people? But the second thing is council tax will go up because the government have decided to give councils more power. But what they're saying is, oh, you can have more power to sting your local people more than ever before because you can now put up council taxes without a referendum, an extra 5%. So what we're going to see is, this is the stealth taxes way, all sorts of ways in which, whichever way you turn as a citizen, you appear to be paying more. And that's all I'm saying is, I think the UK citizens are grown up enough to go, God, we're having a serious economic crisis here. We know that things are tough. But if you only get a diet of gloom, you've already had an item on this morning. Older people getting depressed, worried about their grandkids, actually feeling morose, an atmosphere of doom and gloom, whereas you know that you need to take cuts if you've got vision for how you're going to grow the economic change the economic situation. They've just given us the gloom, and then they said, but don't worry, we'll look after the poorest people. I want them to look after the poorest people, but they have a responsibility to ensure that there's economic prosperity. And they haven't given us any hint that that will ever happen in anyone's lifetimes.
I think it's quite important on second homes because second home owners are demonised.
Oh, I totally agree.
The majority of people who have a second home, they have just one second home. And they may have bought it for a granny or an older relative, or it's an investment for their children.
Because, or for any reason
because pensions are hopeless now, and you're getting no money in the building society, and yet they're going to be whacked.
So what increasing council tax does is it blame shifts.
That's right.
The centre can say to the local authorities, we're going to cut your block grant.
Council.
If you want the money, you get it off the local people and you take the blame. And of course, there is an argument that council tax needs to rise, but it is a form of stealth tax. And I agree with Claire totally on second homes. It's like class war, but it's not very well-targeted class war, is it? Because, as we said, not all second homes are, places that the super rich use twice a year, so cutting local people out of the ability to buy their own home. We simply need to build more homes. No government for the last 10 or 20 years has grasped that nettle. They've endlessly pumped up the housing market with Help to Buy. And it's much easier, isn't it, to just put lots and lots of taxes on middle class and working people than it is to tackle the vested interest. Think back to the early 80s. How did we get out of a moribund, low-growth economy? It wasn't by higher tax. It was by cutting tax and stripping away regulation and tackling the vested interest that was stopping growth from happening. It was about tackling what we used to call then, Andrew, the I'm all right, Jack economy.
Was there a problem with inflation at that point? Because isn't the argument, and we saw this through Liz Truss, didn't we, that if you come in there here and cut everybody's taxes and, you know, try to boost growth, you actually create more of a problem with inflation, and actually people still can't afford things in the shops. I mean, I'm no economist. But...
No, I think we've got to get over this massive demonisation of what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng were trying to do. Yes, they over-egged it. Yes, the timing of certain measures like cutting the top rate of tax in the middle of a cost of living crisis were badly done. Yes, there was a bit of zealousness and they were very much in a hurry. But their central message, we need to grow the economy to fix the public finances.
Just conservative.
That was absolute, that was economics 101.
Right, that is like...
Economics 101.
You don't have to be on the right to believe that. You can basically be somebody who says, I want more economic prosperity.
But
and
even, I think even Rishi Sunak would say that, wouldn't he? I want to do all of those things.
Yeah, but
it's
he's
just
not
politics. It's not economic.
If I could just just on the housing question, I just wanted to say there's a good quote from one of the articles which said Whitby wages can't even afford affordable houses in Whitby. And I understand that, and I think that what this talks to is this idea that, oh, you buy a house, you stick it on the Airbnb market. What about the Whitby person who can't buy their house? Again, I just think all of these things are so superficial, though, because actually somebody with a second home who puts it on Airbnb can actually bring business into the local area.
Right.
The crisis is that there's no houses being built in Whitby, or potentially the crisis is that you're not getting paid enough money in Whitby, right? All of these things are not the blame of Airbnb owners. And so all the time I think that you're having the finger pointed at the wrong culprits and therefore not solving the real problems.
Right.
Here's a question I wonder. Will Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss be in the chamber?
I know.
Where will they be? Let's send out a GB News search party, a prize, whoever spots the former Prime... Because we saw her at the Cenotaph on Sunday.
Yes,
first time. And she looked terrible.
Right, listen, if you spot them, let us know. You can email us, get those eyes and ears out. We'll say goodbye now to Liam Halligan and Claire Fox. More from them at around the same time, just after 7:30. But for now, the time is 10 to 7. Let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines this hour.
The Chancellor has been urged not to raise fuel duty in his autumn statement. The RAC has warned Jeremy Hunt that it would result in higher inflation and put even more stress on already squeezed household budgets. Isabel, I make a prediction. That's one thing that he won't do.
No.
He won't put up the duty.
Interesting.
And the head of MI5 has revealed that Iran has made at least 10 attempts to kidnap or kill British citizens on UK soil. Giving his annual threat update yesterday, he also warned that Britain should be prepared for Russian aggression for years to come.
In the US, the Republican Party have won a narrow majority in the House of Representatives. It follows midterm elections that many predicted to be a so-called red wave, but saw the Democrats retain the Senate. Now, we're talking about a topic that so many people are affected by. Your father suffered with Alzheimer's. My grandmother did as well. Well, scientists now believe that they have solved the mystery of how a certain gene increases the risk of getting the disease.
The gene known as APO4 is a rarer variant of one we all carry in our DNA and is the strongest genetic factor for the development of Alzheimer's.
So could this discovery lead to new treatments? Here to tell us more is dementia expert Professor June Andrews, who joins us this morning from Edinburgh. And this is really exciting. And as I say, so many people interested in this topic because it's such a big problem here in the UK. It sounds as though this is a big breakthrough, but will it actually affect outcomes yet?
Well, it is tremendously exciting, but unfortunately there's no really quick change that it's going to make in the prospects for people who are affected by dementia. You've mentioned there that the gene is the strongest genetic factor for dementia, but there are a whole lot of other factors that make it more likely that someone will get Alzheimer's disease. And so, although this is really good and it's really important, there's no great breakthrough that's going to make a difference in the short term.
If you felt like, I mean, both of us presumably could then get tested, Andrew and I, seeing as we've had it in our family, to see if we have this genetic disposition, but it wouldn't necessarily mean there's anything we can do to prevent it, I guess. We would just know it might be an outcome for us.
Yes, there are interesting parallels with other diseases such as Huntington's disease, which also gives rise to dementia. And very many families are quite clear that they've got Huntington's in their family, but they choose not to be tested because they don't want to live with the definite news that they've got a genetic disease. So for people to know that they've got this gene, it may not definitely say that they're going to get dementia, and it might be that people don't want to live with that particular knowledge because there are so many other things that can accelerate Alzheimer's disease or dementia. These are lifestyle changes that we do have control over. And so I'm not a genetic advisor, but I'm not a great supporter of the idea of being genetically tested because it doesn't really tell you an awful lot more than what you already know. What it does do, though, is that it gives those people who invent pharmaceutical solutions, it gives them more lines of inquiry that would help them perhaps create a drug that in the future could make a difference. But in the meantime, rushing to testing isn't really going to make a difference to anybody. And if you find that you do have the gene, it may make you worried in a way that's unnecessary, in a way that doesn't help, because there are so many things that you can do.
I don't think I'd want to know, would you?
No, I don't think I would. I wonder, Professor, also, how much evidence is there that it is often passed on within a family? Because I'm just thinking about my own father. His brother had it, his sister had it, I think 2 of his sisters had it, and his own father had it.
Well, people ask me about this all the time. And whenever someone's very elderly or older parent has dementia, and perhaps their siblings have had dementia as well, people in the family wonder if they're going to get it. First of all, if you're asking that question, if you're really worried, you should go and see your GP. But in reality, many people have got dementia because of age. It's the strongest cause of dementia, the thing that's most strongly related to dementia. So if the person's parents were very old, perhaps over the age of 90, they had a 50% chance of having dementia anyway. And that's something that the family shouldn't really worry about. In some parts of the world, there isn't very much dementia because people don't live long enough to actually develop it. If, however, the dementia in your family is something that has happened when the person's still of working age, and we know these days that's not under 65, it's perhaps under 70, if the people in the family are under that age and they've developed dementia, it's worth talking to your GP about whether or not there is some kind of familial relationship.
Right.
But to be honest, it's quite rare.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. I think what I take away from that then is I'm not going to do the testing, but I'm going to assume I possibly might get it at some point. So therefore, I'm going to try and change my behaviours to avoid that rather than live in the fear of it. So lots of exercise, lots of brain training. We do that kind of in our job, don't we?
Well, I think we do.
Listen, fascinating to talk to you, Professor June Andrews. Let's hope Big Pharma does use this and tries to come up with some sort of solution because it's so devastating.
And think of the potential income that Big Pharma can make from it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Professor. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break. After that, we'll have more on the big announcement from the Chancellor a little bit later on today. But first of all, here's your Thursday forecast.
Good morning. Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Bit of a wet and windy one for much of the country. We do have Met Office yellow warnings in place, but brighter skies across parts of the south where we should see at least a little bit of sunshine. This area of low pressure brought wet and windy weather for many overnight. It's now heading out into the North Sea, but it's going to kind of curve back round and stick around across northern England and Scotland for much of the day. That rain also affecting much of the Midlands and parts of Wales. We do have Met Office warnings in place. Foggy start across parts of Northern Ireland and a cold start here as well, with temperatures below freezing. The rain will edge into the east of Northern Ireland through the day, and it's going to pep up across eastern Scotland with that wind just coming in from the North Sea. It's going to feel pretty grim. 9, 10, 11 at best and feeling colder. With some sunny spells in the south, could get up into the teens. We will see a few blustery showers across Devon and Cornwall through the day, but much of South Wales and southern England should be dry. Elsewhere, we'll keep the outbreaks of rain, perhaps easing over northern England and parts of the Midlands into this evening, but that rain is sticking around in eastern Scotland. So again, Met Office yellow warning in place here. That's in place for most of Friday as well. Perhaps not quite as cold as last night across Northern Ireland, but still with some clearer skies across the south. Temperatures well down into single figures. Well, we've got the cloud and the rain. Temperatures won't really drop too much overnight, but it will make for another pretty grey day tomorrow across the eastern Scotland. Again, further pulses of rain could cause some disruption. We may see by the end of Friday more than 100 millimetres of rain on the hills and mountains in eastern Scotland. So as I said, that could cause a bit of disruption. A drier day for northeast England, the Midlands, North Wales with some sunny spells. And again in the south, we might squeak up to 13 Celsius. Just a few showers again for Devon and Cornwall. So plenty going on over the next couple of days. Saturday starts chilly. At the moment, most places look dry and bright, but it will turn wet again from the west. And that rain will last into Saturday night.
The Chancellor has a problem. He's got £55 billion to find, and it could soon become your problem too. Tax rises and cuts could be coming, but where will the axe fall? Benefits and pensions, support for energy bills, or social care? To find out what it means for you and your family, the Chancellor's autumn statement live here on GB News today from 10 a.m.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
The Chancellor says Britain must face into the storm as he prepares to unveil the biggest package of tax rises and cuts for a decade.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 17th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Jeremy Hunt will lay out £54 billion of eye-watering tax rises and spending cuts as he presents his autumn statement this morning. He's going to tell the Commons difficult decisions will be made, but they will be based on compassion.
Well, the package is predicted to cause unrest amongst those Tory MPs who supported Liz Truss's growth agenda. We'll bring you analysis of that statement throughout the morning here on GB News.
And the head of MI5 has revealed that security services have foiled at least 10 attempts by Iran to kidnap or kill British citizens in the UK. The news comes just days before England is due to play the Islamic Republic in the World Cup in Qatar.
And we know male fertility has halved since the 70s, but new research shows this is also happening now in Africa and East Asia. We'll be asking if the future of humanity could actually be at risk.
Please get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, to our top story, it's the long-awaited statement from the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, who presents his statement to the House of Commons this morning, telling MPs Britain must, as he says, face into the storm as he unveils a £54 billion package of spending cuts and tax rises.
Well, among the headline pledges expected in the statement are a lowering of the threshold for the 45p tax rate and a raising of the energy price cap to £3,000.
And the Chancellor's also expected to say difficult decisions have to be made and that the wealthiest must bear the heaviest load.
Well, let's speak to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's outside Downing Street for us. Doubtless, there was much of a sleepless night, I imagine, for the Chancellor last night. Look, he's got a big political sell today, an unenviable task, and he'll be wondering how this is going to go down.
He certainly will, and of course this is a statement that has been being built up to for a number of weeks now, ever since Jeremy Hunt became Chancellor. Let's not forget, under Liz Truss, he was preparing the ground for this statement. Originally meant to take place a couple of weeks ago, it got delayed, and of course we've been hearing so many rumours, leaks and press briefings about what may be contained within this statement today. That's all about not making the same perceived mistake that the Liz Truss administration made, which was not rolling the ground before that mini-budget, where people were not expecting what was coming. There were some surprises in that quasi-Kwarteng budget there, and this is attempting to do precisely the opposite. The ground is being well and truly rolled. We are expecting some pretty harsh medicine. It's all about, of course, dealing with inflation through fiscal consolidation, spending cuts and tax rises. Very painful medicine being delivered by this new Conservative government. It's not going to be a particularly pleasant statement, and of course the metaphors that we're hearing around it, that we're facing into a storm, that this is going to be tough for everyone, that everyone's taxes are going to go up. It is a pretty bleak picture that has been painted. We're not expecting many rabbits out of a hat. We're not expecting much good news out of this statement. It's going to be fairly depressing for a lot of people, and what an atmosphere for it to be delivered in. Jeremy Hunt speaking about a storm last night. It certainly feels here on Downing Street that this storm has already arrived.
Tom, I was talking to a former Chancellor the other day in Westminster he arched his eyebrows so high and said the leaks now from budgets are extraordinary. There used to be a time when ministers went into something called budget purdah and very little would come out. But this budget in particular, it seems to me, virtually every day we get another headline telling us what's in there. Will there be anything at all in there that's unexpected?
To some extent, the fact that we've had so many leaks in the run-up to this statement is by design rather than by accident. It will be Treasury officials and indeed political spinners testing the water for various policies, leaking them out to Sunday papers and the like to see how these policy proposals go down in the public, to sort of test the water there and see how they land, and through that sort of almost consultation process, if we can describe it like that, they will pick and choose which measures to deliver. The other aspect of all of this leaking that we've seen in the last few weeks is that we have heard a huge litany of very, very painful policy. Now, to some extent, it could be argued that if not every single one of those very painful policies is implemented, if, say, only 2/3 of them are, we may well think, in spinning terms, that we have got off lightly. This is all about expectation management. This is about what we were expecting to see ahead of this morning's statement. And of course, let's not forget the other crucial part, the other half of what's going on today is that we're going to be seeing the Office for Budget Responsibilities assessment of all of these measures. Now, that means that the Treasury and the OBR have been in conversation. The OBR has been told what is in this autumn statement, and they have assessed the impact of all of the measures within it. That, of course, also leaves more room for leaks, frankly, because more people know what is in this budget, and there is a companion document to go alongside it that we will all be exploring as soon as the Chancellor sits down.
Tom, Andrew there was talking about former chancellors. That was Norman Lamont you've been speaking to. But for anyone who's in any doubt about whether or not this is going to be a return to austerity, another former chancellor has been spotted in and out of Number 11 in recent days, hasn't he? George Osborne's one of the first people Jeremy Hunt called when he got the job, and he's advising him, isn't he?
That is certainly what seems to have been going on. However, there's a crucial difference between what we're describing as austerity now and austerity back in the early 2010s. Number one, in the start of the 2010 Parliament, the economy was actually growing. It wasn't the government wasn't pursuing fiscal consolidation going into a recession. It was pursuing fiscal consolidation coming out of a recession. That's a crucial difference. The other one is the size of the black hole that was attempting to be eliminated. Then it was around 8% of GDP. Now it's around 2% of GDP. So potentially less harsh measures needed now. But the other crucial thing is that when George Osborne was delivering his fiscal consolidation packages, it was predominantly about spending cuts and less about tax rises. It was a ratio of the two, but overwhelmingly about cutting back the state. This time around, we're expecting it to be much closer to 50-50. Tax rises and spending cuts. And crucially, perhaps worryingly for many people, the tax rises are coming first. The tax rises will hit everyone immediately, and it may well look like these spending cuts might be delayed into the future, depending on the state of the economy. So this looks like it is a more high-spending, high-taxing government than we've seen from Conservatives before.
Tom, thanks for that. That's Tom Harwood, our political correspondent outside Number 11
in the pouring rain.
In the pouring rain.
Metaphor
for what we're going to see later.
Yeah, get your brollies out.
Chancellor's talking about a storm. At least the statement's not happening on October the 31st, which was the original plan. Imagine, cartoonist pleasure. Halloween.
Look, lots of you getting in touch this morning. We had a report in the last hour from Devon speaking to pensioners, challenging MPs to live on their pension. Sarah saying, I really resonated with that report this morning, especially when they said, could MPs last on it? They'd starve. As a fellow pensioner, I'm not sure what to expect. And Robert says the same. The pensioners from Devon were down to earth, refreshingly honest on how hard it is for them financially and mentally. I would love to hear from them again.
And John makes a point that I really feel quite strongly about. He said, I want to hear the government is going after big internet retailers who have these massive warehouses which have ultimately affected the British high street. And Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, said the other day he wants to leave most of his £125 billion fortune to charity.
Give some to our high streets.
Could he give some to the HMRC because they don't pay enough tax?
Oh, that's such a good point.
It goes on for years and every government says they're going to do it and they're seen off because people like Bezos can afford better accountants and lawyers and we run away.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Right, OK, look, we're going to talk some more about the big autumn statement now with an economist and the founder of Macrodisiac, that's David Bell, as well as the deputy editor of Capex, Alice Denby. Welcome to both of you. David, I want to start with you. Really interesting take that I gather you've been talking about, which is the way Germany is approaching their black hole at the moment. And the Chancellor at the weekend saying that they're expecting a huge drop in their GDP in the next year, much worse than we are. But they're not actually attempting to address it as the world's going into recession at this stage. So have they got it right or have we?
Well, the funny thing about Germany is actually the scale of their proposed black hole. The Federal Audit Court in Germany has actually gone after Olaf Scholz's government, because there's actually 360 billion euros in out-of-budget debt, basically, in 26 different funds. 200 billion euros has been allocated to the energy crisis. So it seems like really we're going about it all the wrong way. What's funny as well is that Germany's still obviously in the EU. And one of the differences between austerity back in 2010, that period, was that we had to abide by the excessive deficit procedure, which was imposed on EU member states, which I think was a 3.5% debt to GDP ratio, or no, sorry, not debt to GDP, deficit to GDP ratio. We're at 2%, as Tom had said just now. So I don't really understand why we're doing this. It's almost like we're putting ourselves through purgatory for no real reason at all. And if you look as well, you know, perhaps the reason as to why they're doing this, inflation, headline inflation's at 11.1%. That is the food and energy component, as well as the core consumer basket. That's at 11.1%, but the core inflation is at 6.5%. And that's actually flat, 6.5%. It's only been a 0.1% increase month on month.
Can you explain the difference? So the 6.5 core, what is that then?
That's just made up of a basket of goods outside of food and energy.
Right.
Because
things like what?
Literally whatever we buy. You know, it could be clothes,
Okay.
it could be, you know, travel, things like that. And the reason why they exclude that is because energy and food tends to be very, very volatile. So, you know, they just want to give two different measures. But the fact now that we're seeing that right when the energy price cap is coming in is quite interesting. Are we seeing peaking inflation then on that headline number? Perhaps. Which, you know, we might have to start asking, what is the point in all of these cuts if we start seeing that inflation number come down?
So you don't think they should be cutting spending, or you don't think they should be raising taxes?
I don't think they should be doing either. They should be copying what the US has done with their inflation.
They're raising taxes by $800 billion.
They are, but they've also introduced an Inflation Act, which was about a spending of $700 to $800 billion as well, which effectively nullifies it, right? I think, you know, inflation should largely be left, in this case, to market forces. I think it's very much a supply-side driven issue, you know, with nat gas prices being so high, oil prices being relatively high as well. And the demand component of inflation will likely sort itself out. I think this is absolutely the wrong time to be increasing taxes and cutting spending.
And are we the only country in the G7 which is raising taxes going into recession?
No, because the US is doing it as well.
They're doing it as well.
They are doing it as well. But I think the UK is in a bit of a different situation. If we look at things like long-term sickness, where we actually have a very, very different picture to other countries, and that might be as a result of NHS waiting lists, which at the same time, I know the NHS is receiving funding, but, you know, at the same time, that has to be rectified somehow.
It's also because we've got a benefit system that often, I'm afraid to say, makes it more advantageous for people to stay at home and go to work. And they've been banging on about this for 15 years.
Yeah, there's 6 million on at-home, out-of-work benefits.
Yeah.
They reckon around 1 million could probably be coaxed back into work by the government. There's the 600,000 that disappeared from the workforce after COVID, which the Chancellor's specifically saying he wants to try and get back. I don't think he's going to, quite frankly.
No. And some people watching will think, my wages are going to go up 2 or 3%, less than the rate of inflation, but people on benefits who aren't working, I'm not saying that there are some malingerers, in my view, those malingerers will get an inflation-linked increase in their benefits.
Exactly, and you can't be surprised as well at, you know, there might be some over-reporting on the migrant crisis, the asylum seeker crisis, but you can't be surprised at people being upset at that either, you know.
Well, let's bring in the politics side of all of this with Alice Denby. Look, lots of criticism this morning, certainly anyway, from a lot of people on the panels we've been speaking to of what the Chancellor is proposing. But what we've heard, certainly from the G20, from the Prime Minister the last few days, is he's trying to rectify our international reputation after it was, quite frankly, trashed in the wake of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's, what was it, the kamikaze budget, as it was dubbed. Will they be able to do that?
I think what's really frustrating about the situation we find ourselves in, we were talking about George Osborne, we were talking about the first round of austerity, and whatever you think about it, at the time there was political consensus. This was done by a coalition of two parties. Labour agreed with it because because the government had done the messaging. It had this message of we're all in this together, and it had a vision. And now it just feels like we're being dictated to by economic forces, by forecasts set by the OBR, by international markets. And it feels like there's a lot of sleight of hand going
There
here.
are global factors that we can't argue with, aren't there? I mean, we might be calling it being dictated to, but we can't help the fact that there is a war in Ukraine, that we're seeing inflation rise around the world. Well, how do you respond to that?
Absolutely, but I think people would be justified in being quite confused about how Liz Truss was saying just a few months ago that we were in a position to cut taxes, and now we seem to find ourselves in a completely different situation. And I also think if you're asking people to accept tremendous pain, you know, to see public services cut and to see people's incomes reduced through taxation, then you need to have a vision and a message and some sense of hope of where we're going with the country. And it doesn't feel like we have that at all. This feels like an exercise in sort of sleight of hand and expectation management and talking to market forces rather than talking to people about what you want Britain to look like.
And then we'll have this great nervous anticipation after the budget of when the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, proclaims what it thinks. They'll do that at 2 o'clock. Their predictions are wrong every year. So why do we care so much?
And I also think there's a risk that you get into this kind of spiral of decline. So, you know, the OBR gives you a gloomy forecast.
Yeah.
You cut and you raise taxes as a result, and that makes growth worse. And then you get a cycle of gloomier forecasts. So I think there is a danger of being dictated to in this way.
By an unelected body, by the way. The OBR is elected. David, what do you think of the OBR?
I totally agree with you. You know,
they get it wrong all the time.
Awful. And
But would it be better not to have forecasts? I mean, what would be the alternative? I mean, yes, they may not always be right. And we spoke to Simon French from Panmure Gordon this morning. He was saying the OBR will be wrong, the Bank of England will be wrong, I'll be wrong, everyone will be wrong, but they're useful.
I think the thing is that when you look at forecasts in isolation and not on aggregate, you don't create an average of the forecasts. That's when you get into sort of political, almost power play. Like, you shouldn't base the whole kind of policy around one body's forecast.
Yeah.
You should base it along maybe 10 to 20 different forecasts. The whole concept of a black hole is ridiculous anyway, because, you know, myself as a trader, I look at things from a probability perspective. I consider that nothing in the future is certain. But economists do it totally differently. They consider things certain, then they explain why they were wrong, almost all the time, you know? So there needs to be some semblance of, OK, it is just a forecast at the end of the day.
But you know, if the OBR give it a gloomy thumbs down, Labour will seize on it and it'll have an impact in the markets.
Oh, absolutely. But the thing is as well, you know, is that if we go back to Liz Truss's policies, they weren't bad policies.
No.
You know, I've said it to you, Isabel, a couple of times I've been on, is that they were just mistimed.
Well, Rishi Sunak himself would say that.
Yeah.
He wants to do all of the things that Liz Truss went and did, but he just believes that it wasn't the right time. And I suppose the market reaction to that proved him to be right. He was vindicated largely.
Yeah, I mean, but they did come after big rate hikes. That's the only thing. So when, you know, the market's going to look at rate hikes more than they're going to look at the fiscal side. But when you're adding in, you know, a fiscal change like that to two massive rate hikes, one in the US, one in the UK, it's going to cause the bond market to go
Alice,
mad.
we were talking a little bit about benefits and them getting an uplift in line with inflation. We've also talked on this programme quite a lot about pensioners, and I believe Jeff Moody is going to be talking to some in just a moment. But I just want to talk about this, because this is where politics really comes into play, because the Prime Minister's quoted on the front of, I think it's the Times this morning, talking about the wealthiest bearing, you know, the biggest brunt, those with the broadest shoulders, all those phrases that we're used to in this. A lot of pensioners are wealthy, and I know not all of them, but it just goes to show how crude the triple lock can be. And it makes me unpopular to say this, but I think it goes the same when you talk about those on welfare. A lot of them are worthy recipients, some of them aren't. And I think it is difficult to justify giving people a triple lock when inflation's at 11%, when people like nurses are going to food banks and not being able to pay their bills.
Oh, well, I'm glad you said it, because I know how strongly your viewers feel about the triple lock, but I agree with you. It's not justified at a time when pensioners do have a lot of housing wealth, for example. We talked about people disappearing from the workforce. We had an article on CapEx looking into this, which found that a lot of people who had retired because, you know, they found out, well, actually, you know, my house is worth more, and the pandemic actually left them better off. And as you say, when young people are increasingly expected to be working longer, I mean, nobody in their 20s thinks that they're going to be retiring at 65. I don't think it's justifiable to ask to ask the working population to support an ever-growing number of older people.
But this is just politics, isn't it? Because they're Conservative voters.
They vote Conservative in the main. But you have to think about wealthy pensioners. The King is a wealthy pensioner. He will get the same increase in his pension that somebody living in a 2-bedroom housing association flat gets. Tony Blair, the same.
I mean, this is a problem with any kind of universal benefit.
But the government always say if you means test it, it's too complicated, it's too expensive, but it's also a popular policy with people over the age of 67.
Let's put this very point out. I should say, sorry, thank you very much, David Bell and Alice Denby. But on the topic of pensioners, look, I reiterate that this isn't applicable to all pensioners. Not everyone's as wealthy as the King, of course, but there are a great deal of pensioners who aren't so well off. And I know Jeff Moody spoke to them in a VT a little bit earlier in the programme. He is now in Barnstable for us this morning. Jeff, who have you been speaking to?
I'm actually in South Molton, which is just down the road. I'm at the market, which is just beginning to open up. I'll be speaking to stall holders and customers throughout the morning about what they expect from this fiscal statement. But yes, it was very interesting, wasn't it, those pensioners? Because as you were saying, Isabel, there's two very distinct views that came across from those interviews. First of all, the people that are saying, look, we've worked all our lives, we've paid taxes all our lives. We never imagined that in our golden years we'd be struggling to keep warm, to keep fed. This is unbelievable. And yet there's the other raft of opinion of people that saying, look, we grew up during the war. We're used to rationing. Make do and mend and living within your means is something that's intrinsic to us. That's the way we were brought up. We mend things, we hand things down. This is what we do, and this is what we do well. And you've just got to get on with it and hope that that things change. So two very distinct views. Talking to the more general public this morning, I'm getting a sense of hope from today's budget. Hope that however eye-watering these changes will be, eventually it will mean that things will get better. Have a listen to what they've been saying to me.
Things get better. That's why the energy prices come down and everything back to normal, really.
Do you think that's likely to happen?
Not for a while. Not for a while. I would have said, obviously, that he feels that inflation's going to come down, that we will eventually get ourselves back to some sort of normality, even if it takes a year or so. Obviously, the biggest thing to everybody is price of foods and things, because even we notice going in the shop, it's going up by loads. It's not by little bits. It's going up by a lot.
Hopefully things get back to normal. Let's hope indeed. Interestingly, a marketplace like this, stallholders have been saying to me, actually this could be very good for them, the cost of living crisis, because of course they have very limited overheads. And they're saying they are noticing that more and more people are tending to buy their groceries, their fruit and veg and their crafts and everything else from marketplaces instead. So every cloud.
Indeed. All right, thank you very much indeed, Jeff Moody in South Molton. It's very lovely where you are behind you, and I have a feeling they've probably got some of those artisan breakfast offerings.
He's about to start.
He's going to go and not jealous at all.
Where's our artisan breakfast? Haven't noticed.
Exactly. Look, we might go and try and find one, track one down during the break. Aidan McGee, though, will be back after that with all of the sports stories. See you in a second. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Hey! Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back at 7:28. Still to come on the programme this morning, around 8:20, we will be speaking to the man who auctioned off Diego Maradona's legendary Hand of God ball for £2 million yesterday. But find out why, despite that bid, it is still looking for a seller. The mind boggles.
Why do they call it Hand of God? Why don't they just call it Hand of a Cheat? Because he cheated, didn't he? Punching the ball in the net. At 8:45, we're going to be finding out if magic mushrooms could hold the key to treating depression. Are you going to try them on the set?
I don't know if that's legal.
Right.
If it's legal, of course.
Right.
But, you know, I'm not sure. Let us know what you think. Loads of you getting in touch this morning. We were talking about man-sized teddies, weren't we, about an hour ago? Apparently, a man-sized bear costs £146, according to Tony. He says it's absolutely bonkers. I completely agree. Meanwhile, Joe says, my late wife, Dorothy, made me a big teddy. Although he's not nearly as big as the man-sized one seen this morning, he is still large enough to sit in the car passenger seat as my reminder of her as my companion. Oh my goodness, that breaks my heart.
Right.
Joe, that is so sweet. Don't be cynical,
No,
Andrew.
it's very sweet. It's very sweet.
Right.
Yes. Now, this is the part of the programme I know so much about. Delighted to say Aidan McGee joins us now to discuss the latest and the biggest sports stories. And, of course, there is a rather big one coming up that even I've heard of.
I should say, you know, with the Hand of God thing, the reason it's not called Hand of a Cheat is because that quote was given by Maradona himself immediately after the game. He
called
said
it
it was a hand of God as a result of revenge for the Falklands in 1982.
That what it
bring
was.
the Falklands into it.
Or the Malvinas, as he called it.
It was Mrs Thatcher's finest hour.
We gave those sheep a good thrashing.
We did.
England trained for the first time yesterday in Qatar. They were a little bit surprised by the heat, apparently, the players in the training, because they were told that the stadiums would be temperate and would be air-conditioned. Of course, training's completely different because you can't manipulate that situation there. But 32-degree heat yesterday. Kyle Walker had groin surgery in October. He's going to be a big miss for England. He's fit to train on Monday, fit to play on Monday, but he's going to miss the missed the game. He's not quite right. There are players who are going to be fitter. James Maddison, who's like a kid in a sweet shop, really. I mean, he said he had his whole family around when he got the call-up. He couldn't believe he'd been called up for the World Cup squad. It looked so unlikely, despite his brilliant form. He said he invited his partner and his family around for a dinner and everything, and he got to the World Cup yesterday, and he did a media conference, and he was absolutely full of the joys of spring. It makes a real contrast to that horrible generation of 15 years ago, the golden generation who shied away from everything and didn't want to participate in local activities when they went to World Cups. They didn't perform on the pitch either, which was another big problem. But I've got my predicted 11 as well.
Right. For
the first game on Monday. I've also got a crystal ball because as Mystic McGee, I predicted one result in the summer. I've been trading off it ever since.
Go on, what did you predict?
I predicted that the England Lionesses would win 2-1 against Germany in the final, and it came good. I even forgot I made the prediction. That's how big it was. But I'm going to actually predict the starting 11 now. Okay. If you can go. Okay, so should we go for it? Should we? Okay. Mystic McGee's crystal ball. Now is the time to reveal all. Okay, so I'm going for, if we can see the graphic, Jordan Pickford in goal.
Okay.
That's because he's not letting England down at all. You can ask questions about his club form over the last couple of years, but as I say, the England manager likes to trust players that has done the business for him before, and Pickford certainly falls into that category. There's the weakness in the back of the defence, I would have thought, in the back three. Harry Maguire, Eric Dyer, not in particularly great form, but I think they will make up a back three alongside John Stones. We've got Kieran Trippier and Luke Shaw. We've had injury problems at the wing-back, so those two are going to play in those positions. I don't think he's going to disturb Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham in the middle. Declan Rice is first name on the sheet, just given his form for West Ham in the last couple of years. Jude Bellingham's been tearing up in Germany for Borussia Dortmund. Raheem Sterling, again, not been in great form for Chelsea this season since his move from Manchester City, but he's going to be in the side ahead of Saka. That's just my prediction, I should say. I mean, Southgate might tear this up on Monday. Harry Kane up front, as you'd expect, chasing a record goal-scoring feat for England, of course, chasing Wayne Rooney's record of 53 goals, and Phil Foden of Manchester City. So that's my starting 11. As I say, he could go for a different formation. I don't think they have too many problems against Iran. That's the easiest of the three games.
So is that his strongest team, or is that a team he's a middle-ranking team because he wants to save his best players for later on?
Possibly, but again, it's not. This is only my prediction. It's not. It's from the. This has come from the crystal ball.
Right.
But yeah, that's what I think he will go for. Yes, he could be saving players for later on. There are some players who aren't going to be quite fit for the first game, so he could be saving them for later on. If you could expect to go deep into the competition, 6-7 games, you're going to need your squad.
Yeah, OK, look, I've got a conflict of interest in all this. I'm married to a Welshman.
Right.
So I'm going to accuse you of what Prince William has now been accused of as well, and that is focusing mainly on the England team. He did a bit of a boo-boo, didn't he, by going and handing out their numbers and getting behind the England team. And actually, this is a huge deal, the World Cup for Wales.
I know.
First one since
He says he's supporting...
He is the Prince of Wales, after all.
Exactly. Well, he says he's supporting both. I mean, it's a huge tournament for Wales because it was even bigger for them, really, because they haven't qualified for 64 years.
Where's your predictions for them, then?
Well, OK, Monday, I think... Well, the starting 11, I'm not sure, but I do think they will... I think they'll do well to avoid defeat against the USA, because USA are populated with some really good European-level players.
Yeah.
And I think...
You're predicting defeat from the off.
No. I think they'll avoid defeat.
Oh, they'll avoid it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think it'll be a draw. I think it'll be a draw. And if they can go into the next game against Iran, they can put themselves in a strong position by the time they go into the England game. Maybe 4 points, but yeah.
Gareth Bale is the key, is he?
Oh, without doubt, yeah, without doubt. I mean, look, it depends if he's fit. I mean, Andrew's played 28 minutes since September.
Right.
Now, don't get me wrong, England have taken plenty of players in the past who weren't quite fit, and they've rushed them back and shoehorned them into the lineup. But even so, 28 minutes, you have to be a really seriously decent player to be given that kind of, or afforded that kind of, just the trust to be able to make a difference, even though you've played so little football.
You'll be horrified to hear this story, but I was in a lift with Gareth Bale in Manchester.
Right.
It was the Labour conference, and we got chatting, and I said...
Just recently?
No, a couple of years ago, and I said, are you here for the conference? And he said, what conference is that? And I said... The Labour Party conference. He said...
Obviously.
Yeah, obviously. And he said, no, I'm here for the football. Oh, I said, who's playing? And he said, whatever. And I said, which team are you supporting? Did not recognise. He had a cap on.
Yeah.
But I honestly had no idea.
Andrew, I reckon footballers so rarely experience that because we are a nation, absolutely, who worship our footballers.
Yeah.
He probably loved it.
Possibly.
I hope for Wales' sake the lift didn't say going down.
Was it going up or down?
It was going up.
Oh, good.
Yeah. He was very nice.
Oh, listen, he's a terrific talent, and he's just something about Gareth Bale in a Wales shirt. I just wonder if it's just a little bit too much to ask this time.
Right.
Oh, don't say that. Right, Aidan McGee, thank you very much indeed with your crystal ball. We'll see you again very soon.
Now, after the break, we're going to be going through the papers with Liam Halligan and Baroness Claire Fox.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
It's 7:40. It's our favourite time in the programme. That's when we go through the papers. This morning we're joined by our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, because, of course, it is a big day economically, and the director of the think tank, the Academy of Ideas, Baroness Claire Fox. Thank you both for sticking around with us this morning. Liam, you want to start with the front of The Guardian, and this is interesting because Jeremy Hunt is planning to lift that energy price cap. Tell us more about all of this.
Here you go, front page of The Guardian, millions face rise in energy bills as Hunt lifts price cap. Going back to that Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng mini-budget, the energy price cap then was meant to last for 2 years for households. Jeremy Hunt, when he came in as Chancellor, limited that to 6 months until next April. It strikes me that the real reason financial markets were so spooked by that mini-budget was that energy price cap. It's an unlimited liability on the government. They have to deliver energy at a certain cost wherever wholesale prices are, so they have to subsidise. We now know that's only going to last until next April. What The Guardian is doing here is emphasising the fact that after April, I think the Chancellor will be targeting assistance on energy bills, on lower-income households, perhaps on pensioners and other vulnerable groups, and that means the majority of the rest of us won't get any help at all wherever wholesale energy prices are. The good news is that since August, energy prices have actually come down a lot, from about €350 per megawatt hour to just over 100, a big reduction. The trouble is, we haven't seen much of a reduction in our energy bills. And I think a lot of consumers are waking up to the fact that there doesn't seem to be, just like when oil prices go up, petrol prices go up immediately, up like a rocket, down like a feather. When oil prices come down, petrol and diesel prices stay where they are. So I think there's going to be a lot of focus after today, rightly so, on how the energy market works, because wholesale energy prices have come down a bit, and we haven't seen that reflected in our bills.
So does that mean the people selling us the energy are making a huge profit?
Potentially, yeah. But it's
an even bigger one.
The energy market works in a really weird way. All energy is linked to that we pay our household bills is linked to the price of gas. But we're increasingly told, Andrew, that renewables are really cheap. And yet, if you've got a bill that's focused entirely on renewables, you're not paying less. The market isn't transparent. And it's another area where you need to tackle the vested interests and get in there, rather than just raising taxes on people.
But Truss was probably wrong, wasn't she, to fix it for 2 years? Because
I think,
we don't know what it was going to be like in 6 months, let alone 18 months.
I heard that it was going to cost the same as the entire NHS to fund that.
I said at the time, these predictions are completely mad. And they were completely mad. It may be that the energy price cap doesn't cost us much at all, because it always depended on the wholesale price of gas. So you can make up any number, because you could just predict wherever the wholesale price of gas was going to be. But it is, the likelihood is it is going to cost tens of billions. I do think it was necessary to rein it in to 6 months. But as The Guardian rightly points out, after that 6 months ends in April, unless you're a specially targeted group for assistance, you will have to pay the open market price.
I mean, why should I be getting the same help from the government that people who are really struggling with four kids?
I think that the point about the Liz Truss quasi-Kwarteng idea, which completely backfired, was that they thought that they were going to announce that 2-year, don't worry about your energy bills, and then everyone wouldn't notice the fact that they were cutting taxes and doing this extraordinary thing over there. It was kind of a buy-off. As it happens, nobody noticed the 2-year energy point. Except when I say nobody noticed, I mean the markets might have done, but I'm just making the point that they didn't get the gain from that.
They didn't get the credit, did they?
They were in the middle of announcing it, and news started to spread that Her Majesty the Queen was,
and they didn't
unfortunately reaching the end of her life.
They didn't return to it when they then did the mini budget. The point about that was that it was always therefore an ill-thought-through policy, but more of a kind of a buy-off for what they really wanted to do. My problem with this, though, again, is no mention in this mini-budget about fixing the problem of energy. I mean, this is, we're all focusing on costs, whereas what we're not doing is focusing on the fact that, yet once more, you have a Conservative government that's not investing in cheap, reliable energy. In fact, it's just returned to status quo normal, everything's renewables, no real commitment.
There was a deal with the States that Rishi Sunak was coming up with, wasn't it, to transport liquefied natural gas over in a sort of attempt to try and ease...
Yes, but I mean, there's no ambitious energy policy beyond green. And I mean, that's all I'm saying is, and that limits... Because what you need to know is that even if we're going to have to pay more for our energy bills in 6 months' time, unless you're in the very poor sector, that there's going to be a commitment to having cheap, reliable energy for the foreseeable future, energy security, so we're not dependent on abroad. And yet, what they've done, they've brought back the moratorium on fracking. It's not that fracking would solve everything, I'm not saying that, but there's just no ambition here whatsoever. I just get fed up that everything is at the level of how much you pay now with no vision whatsoever.
And the windfall tax, which we pretty much sure they're going to bring another one in today, is that going to be a bar to companies investing in new gas fields, oil fields in the North Sea?
It depends how it's stacked. I think there will be a headline windfall tax because the politics of it are just too irresistible.
Yeah, of course.
Let's make these big companies pay more because we're all paying more. But it depends on the detail of the allowances. It may be you don't have to pay the windfall tax if you divert the money into developing new North Sea oil and gas fields, because that's how Rishi Sunak's windfall tax back in March, seems like a long time ago, was stacked. We are importing more liquefied natural gas from the US. Let's say, this war in Ukraine, it's been a huge opportunity for America's now massive gas exporting industry. There's a slight degree, there's a big degree of hypocrisy in this. We're saying we're hitting our net zero targets and we're not using fossil fuels like gas.
Importing it instead.
But there's a much bigger carbon footprint if you liquefy the gas, stick it in a container ship, run it 3,000 miles across. I mean, the energy involved in liquefying natural gas and then regasifying it is huge.
Yeah.
Massive.
Forgive me, guys, we have limited time and I do want to squeeze in some other stories because we will be talking about this autumn statement throughout the course of the day. Claire, you've chosen a story on the front of the Times this morning, and this is about doctors' failures to work weekends and the impact it's having on the NHS crisis at the moment.
Well, I think we talked earlier about the fact that one of the frustrations for many people is that if you're asked to pay more taxes, you're not actually getting a decent service for them, right? So it's not like pay more tax and get a decent NHS. I think that it's easy to scapegoat doctors, so I want to avoid doing that. But I think it's not unreasonable to have an expectation that somehow working at weekends is not completely barred by anyone who, any doctors or consultants. There is absolutely nothing more frightening than being taken into hospital on a Friday, because you just know that nothing's going to happen to you till the Monday, right? And then we wonder why there's queues, and there's all sorts of problems in the NHS. And I think that a commitment by both GPs in terms of their opening hours, but consultants in hospitals to say we will not have a bar on working at weekend would be where citizens would think, well, everyone is now pulling together to make the NHS work. It's one of those working practices that makes no sense in 2022.
And nurses have to work 24/7, 365 days of the year.
But they're almost, therefore, like caretakers over the weekend. So if nothing substantial, if you're saying that there's a crisis in cancer care, which there is, let's be frank, the lockdown has exacerbated this enormously and leading to people who are undiagnosed with more acute conditions. But then you say, oh, but we don't work weekends. So what can we do? It's like, well, work weekends. So although I'm not normally
Don't have cancer at the weekend, Claire.
Although I'm not, I worry about the government kind of blaming the workers, as it were. I do think that Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, has got a point.
Why do we train so few doctors? It's mad. There's so many kids with perfect A-levels and GCSEs that would make fabulous doctors, and they don't get a chance.
Well, at the moment,
it's absolutely crazy. It's like it's a closed shop. They don't want to train enough so they can keep their wages.
And it's also the case that, just one of the headlines of yesterday was that they've announced that you don't need a degree to be a police officer, which seems to me to be ultimately sensible. But it's the same with nursing, because what's happened is nursing has been turned into a profession in a way that doesn't help anyone. You know what I mean? You get a degree that's kind of pointless, but then you kind of say, oh, no, that's not really... I've now got a degree, so I don't do that kind of nursing.
But also
loads of people would be nurses if they had accessibility at this point.
And if they didn't have to pay for their own training.
Exactly.
They brought the bursaries back.
Exactly.
And look, the NHS is such a difficult place to work for doctors as well. Many of them moving abroad. My contemporaries, so many gone to Australia and Canada. Look, we have to wrap there. We're being encouraged to wrap that. So, Liam Halligan, Claire Fox, thank you both. More just after 8:30. Right, the time is coming up to 10 to 8. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines.
The Chancellor's been urged not to raise fuel duty in his autumn statement. The RAC has warned Jeremy Hunt it would result in higher inflation and put even more stress on already squeezed household budgets.
The head of the MI5 has made an extraordinary revelation. He says Iran has made at least 10 attempts to kidnap or kill British citizens on UK soil. Giving his annual threat update yesterday, he also warned that Britain should be prepared for Russian aggression for years to come.
And in the US, the Republican Party has won a very narrow majority in the House of Representatives. It follows midterm elections that many predicted to be called a so-called red wave, but saw the Democrats retain the Senate.
Now, on the week, the Earth's population officially surpassed 8 billion. A new study with data from 53 countries has warned that sperm counts have more than halved since the 1970s.
Now, this analysis gives the first insight on trends in South America, Asia, Africa, as well as Western countries, suggesting increased BMI and toxic exposure could be to blame.
Well, obstetrician, gynaecologist and fertility expert Dr. Larissa Corder joins us in the studio to tell us more. And I must admit, when I saw we were doing this story, I thought to myself, I have heard this, certainly in Western society, that it is increasingly a really worrying trend amongst men and their fertility. But this new research shows that this isn't just a Western problem now.
Yeah, exactly. It's a global problem. And you're right, that, you know, this isn't any particular niche. We've heard this over the last couple of years, actually, you know, this worrying decline in population levels. But the difference now is that we know that it's global. So it's really important to talk about this for a couple of reasons. One is the declining fertility rate, which also seems to be going in tandem with increasing miscarriage rates. And whereas when we used to discuss conception and pregnancy purely from that female perspective and female onus, now it's very clear that male factor is really, really important. And we know that overall, that infertility around the world, 50% of that is caused by male factor alone. So that's really, really important. Yeah. But the other deeper problem here that hasn't necessarily been discussed is that male infertility is really closely tied in with chronic male conditions, as well as negative adverse effects and impact on any children that are born through these abnormal sperm. Right. So when we talk about that in more detail, there's something that's called testicular dysgenesis syndrome, and male infertility forms part of that. But this also includes the fact that testicular cancer is on the rise, as well as certain genitourinary abnormalities as well. So this is things like undescended testicles. And also, interestingly, a genetic condition called Klinefelter syndrome as well. So we think that all of this is potentially tied in with these decreasing fertility rates seen in men and possibly caused by the same factors that are causing that too.
But what are the factors that are causing this?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So whereas before we used to think that a lot of that might be genetic, now we think that a lot of it is what we call epigenetic. So this is environmental factors acting on genes specifically. And this is really important when it comes to sperm. So a bit of a science lesson here this time in the morning. What happens is that the sperm are closely regulated by cells in the testicles, so they're protected and produced by these cells. And there's specific windows in time when these cells are particularly sensitive to these environmental factors, which are things called xenoestrogens. So these are chemicals that mimic natural estrogens that act on these cells and affect cell behaviour. And the times when this happens most specifically is during fetal time, so when the man is still in the mother's womb, is a fetus growing and developing, and also adolescence. So it means that actually whatever the woman who's pregnant is being exposed to, things like pesticides, even, you know, simple household products like
I was covered in hairspray when I was presenting, pregnant with both my children, and I wonder, oh gosh, about the impact of that.
Right. And the thing is that none of these products come in with warning labels. There's nothing to say these are potential endocrine disruptors that can affect the health of your children and your fertility. And that's really, really wrong.
And I suppose it's easy when we're talking about 8 billion people on the planet and, you know, we're all told about the carbon footprint of each person to think, well, maybe it's not a bad thing if this ends up reducing the population. But actually, fertility is, especially if there are problems with fertility, problems with conceiving, hugely devastating for the individuals involved and can't be overstated, really.
Yeah, totally. That, but also what we've just discussed, the fact that, you know, your chronic long-term health is affected as well, plus the health of future generations, because this is a transgenerational effect. And if we don't do something about it now, then it will continue.
What do we do about it now?
Yeah, so here's the good news. That the flip side, it's not all doom and gloom today. Yeah. Just want to point that out. So, you know, the good thing about this is that we now understand the environment has a significant impact. And we know that sperm turn over every 3 months. They replenish and regenerate. So once we are aware of doing something more positive, like, you know, getting more exercise, having a good diet, making sure your food is free of pesticides if it can be, being mindful of the products you're using. And I just want to point out, I know the budget is coming out today, but it's so important for the government to concentrate on this, because in the cost of living crisis, when so many people are struggling, you know, in buying what they can to survive, they don't know they're exposing themselves to all of this stuff. And it's really important that an effort is made so that these things are more affordable affordable. So, you know, organic food isn't just something for the privileged few, because this is affecting all of us. So when we understand this, when we understand how to adjust our lifestyles and that becomes more accessible, then we can do something about it and reverse these trends and also create better health for children and for men out there.
Well, there we go. We've been talking about needing a bit of hope in all of this. Dr. Cordy, you have given people hope, I suppose, watching this. If they are worrying about the fertility, there are things that can be done.
Absolutely.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Absolutely fascinating talking to you.
Thank you.
And stay with us, because we're going to have more analysis, of course, on the Chancellor's upcoming autumn statement, one of the most keenly awaited budget statements in decades, I would say.
No red box, though.
No, doing things differently.
The Chancellor has a problem. He's got £55 billion to find, and it could soon become your problem too. Tax rises and cuts could be coming, but where will the axe fall? Benefits and pensions, support for energy bills, or social care? To find out what it means for you and your family, the Chancellor's autumn statement, live here on GB News today from 10 a.m.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Chancellor says Britain must face into the storm as he prepares to unveil the biggest package of tax rises and cuts for a decade.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 17th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Andrew Pearce.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Jeremy Hunt will lay out £54 billion of tax rises and spending cuts as he presents his autumn statement this morning. He'll tell the Commons that difficult decisions will be made, but they will be based on compassion.
The package is predicted to cause unrest among many Tory MPs who supported Liz Truss's short-lived growth agenda. We'll bring you analysis of that statement throughout the morning.
In other news today, the head of MI5 has revealed that security services have foiled at least 10 attempts by Iran to kidnap or kill British citizens in the UK. The news comes just days before England are due to play the Islamic Republic in the World Cup.
And the countdown to that World Cup is on, but back in 1986, it was all about that hand of God moment in England's quarter-final against Argentina. We're speaking to the auctioneer responsible for trying to sell off Madonna's controversial football.
Or even Maradona's.
Exactly.
Madonna might have some footballs as well, but I think
yes.
Maradona's was the one.
I think that was the one. Exactly.
I love it. Look, let us know your thoughts this morning. Get in touch the usual ways. You can tweet us or you can email gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, it's our top story. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt will be presenting his autumn statement to the House of Commons a little later this morning. He's already warned MPs Britain must face into the storm as he unveils a £54 billion package of spending cuts and tax rises.
Well, among the headline pledges expected in the statement are a lowering of the threshold for the 45p tax rate and a raising of the energy price cap to £3,000.
And we think the Chancellor's going to say difficult decisions will have to be made and that the wealthiest must bear the heaviest load.
Well, let's speak to Tom Harwood, who is our political correspondent outside Downing Street this morning for us. Tom, look, the Chancellor has to make these difficult decisions. He's talking about global headwinds and difficult times, but he's also going to have problems within his own party. He'll be very unhappy with some of those announcements today, won't he?
He certainly will. Let's not underestimate the fact that there are political choices being made today. There's nothing inevitable about having to raise taxes. There are other choices that could be made. Ultimately, the black hole that we're all describing in the public finances isn't some sort of structural deficit. This is just the gap that needs to be breached to meet the Chancellor's own targets in terms of reducing the debt to GDP ratio over 5 years' time. Now, if the Chancellor had set a different goal, the fiscal hole, as we call it, would be a different size. If the Chancellor chose to deliver this fiscal consolidation through spending cuts rather than tax rises, we'd be having a different conversation today as well. Ultimately, there are different ways that you can approach this issue. There has been a choice within Downing Street that the way to approach this issue will be predominantly through these tax rises, predominantly on wealth creators, and that is going to be very uncomfortable for a lot of instinctive Conservatives who believed they joined a party that was about low taxes, about spurring growth and economic activity, and are now being forced through voting lobbies, or will shortly be forced through voting lobbies, for a number of tax rises, not least bringing a top rate of tax higher than anything that Blair would ever have dreamed of delivering for far more people. It's a really quite difficult situation for many Conservative MPs to be facing up to, and we saw, of course, Esther McVey just yesterday at Prime Minister's Questions, a former cabinet minister herself, of course, really questioning the wisdom of raising all of these taxes. Perhaps there'll be more of an issue on Conservative backbenches with regard to the strategy that has been chosen by this Prime Minister and this Chancellor. But we're expecting a mix. We're expecting tens of billions in tax rises and indeed tens of billions in spending cuts as well. The Health Department expected to be protected, but just about every other department facing funding freezes and real terms spending cuts. This is a cocktail of gloom, really, as we are marching forward into a very difficult economic circumstance. It is, however, fair to say that not every country is heading into this very difficult global context with the same policy prospectus. It is, after all, a choice to raise these taxes.
OK, Tom Harwood with that analysis. Thank you very much indeed.
Let's bring in Freddie Gray, Deputy Editor of The Spectator. Freddie, Estimate Vey, Tom was referring to there. Now, just a few months ago, she was on Jeremy Hunt's running ticket to be his Deputy Prime Minister when he ran to be Tory leader. I think he got 20 votes. That went well. But here he's now got Estimate Vey threatening to vote against the various measures in the financial package. Very unusual for Tory MPs not to support a budget.
Very unusual, but there's nothing unusual, is there, about Tory infighting? It is all that happens now. It's sort of the only story in domestic politics. I think there is a lot of resentment and bitterness within the Tory party, particularly at this sort of project. George Osborne is behind a lot of this budget. He was behind Project Fear. I think the feeling now is he's behind Project Gloom. And they think within number 10, number 11, they think within there that they are cleverly managing expectations. If we do sort of, 5 days of gloomy narrative, maybe a couple of weeks of this, a few more weeks of this, then eventually Brits will start to think it's not that bad. Actually things are all right. But it's a bit like for me it feels like when someone comes over to fix your broken boiler, which is definitely broken, the economy is in bad shape, and then says, "Oh, this is really bad. This is terrible," and you'll think, "Oh God, how much is it going to cost?" And then you are ripped off, but because you've been expecting such a huge rip-off, it actually doesn't feel that bad, and that's what they think they're doing. I'm not sure the public feel that way about it, and I'm not sure the entire Tory party does either.
Well, let's bring in Laurie Laird, economics commentator, on this. How should we be fixing the boiler, to continue Freddie's metaphor there? I mean, is this harsh medicine?
It's such a good metaphor.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can work on this a little bit. You're still going to pay to fix the boiler, right? You need that boiler. And to talk about spending cuts when we're heading into a recession, which is essentially saying, I'll put another jumper on and another jumper. I'm not going to fix the boiler. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. We learned that economic orthodoxy is actually something we need to pay attention to, right? That's all that we learned from Liz Truss. Another part of economic orthodoxy is don't cut spending when you're going into a recession. Your government spending is your backstop
But the problem is inflation as well whilst you're going into a recession. It's like all these problems that they're trying, this energy crisis. I mean, it's not just one problem that they're trying to tackle with this autumn statement.
Absolutely. But we are in a position where we can, believe it or not, after Liz Truss, there's no extra premium. There's no political uncertainty premium on gilt rates in UK borrowing rates. The UK can borrow for 10 years at slightly over 3%. If you're not going to borrow a little bit when you're going into a recession, I'm not sure when you would use that borrowing space.
OK, so do you think that's going to be the narrative then today from a lot of economists, that actually, what we've learned from Trussonomics is that orthodoxy needs to be respected, but you can also over-egg the, what's the phrase?
If you can borrow, if you can borrow at 3% for 10 years and you're going into a recession, this is the time to do it. I agree with Freddie, though, that I think that the powers that be are really preparing us for something that might be less worse than what they're saying. Really, lowering expectations.
It's almost dishonest when they do that, in a sense, isn't it?
Wait, politicians not quite telling the truth? Really?
Yeah. I mean, do you not think the voters see through it in the end, Freddie?
I think so. I think the voters. Well, I think the markets will look at sort of the OBR forecast, which will go live as soon as the budget.
Which is usually wrong.
Which is almost invariably wrong. But the problem is it satisfies the markets, and that was Truss's big mistake with the mini budget. She didn't do that sort of fake dance with statistics that the markets expect.
What about the ordinary person in all of this? And I hate the phrase the ordinary person, but people who are going to be looking at their bills at the end of the month, knowing that there's a cost of living crisis at the moment. Everybody's been warned, as we've been talking about, paying more tax, but people are going to be fed up and depressed, aren't they, after this?
Well, again, we've told them to be fed up and depressed, so it can only be better than what they have prepared them for. I'm a little bit surprised that we're talking about raising the energy price cap, but still retaining it as a universal thing. I think that's not the best use of government money. I would prefer to see that targeted at the people who are most vulnerable.
But that's when the politics drives the policy, isn't it? Because it's popular with the voters who are over 65, who tend to vote Conservative.
Well, and who tend to choose the Conservative Party leader.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, well, listen, Freddie, what's your prediction then on how this is going to be received today? We've already seen there's going to be quite a bit of disappointment from factions within the Conservative Party. Do you think the Labour Party are going to have a field day?
I think so. I think this gives the Labour Party a golden opportunity to be the party of optimism, because now they can start sounding almost Liz Truss-like and start talking about growth and how they believe in Britain and the British economy, because they're faced with a government that is responsible for the economic climate and is also saying the economic climate is terrible. So good news for Labour.
Yeah. Do you have any intelligence? Because I'm fascinated by this, Freddie. Are Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng going to be in the chamber to hear the budget? Or are they going to be cowering in an office out of sight, out of mind?
I'm going to bet out of sight, but I don't have any particular intelligence.
Right.
Yeah, Andrew's already been appealing to GB News viewers and listeners up
If
and
you
down the
find
country.
her,
You spot
you
them.
find him, tell us. We want to know where they are.
I would send them in. I think just for the value.
The Lion's Den.
Well, yeah, and they would, because we haven't seen her in the chamber yet.
No.
No. Where's she going to sit?
There are all sorts of stories about what she's up to. I mean, I think she deservedly wants to be out of the public eye for a bit because.
And what stories have you heard about what she's up to?
Which ones can you share?
I think that she's not very well. I think
that's probably right.
Having it's mentally a terrible thing to go through.
Yeah.
No matter what you think of her.
Yeah.
And I think she definitely deserves a bit of time away.
Yeah.
Fair enough. OK, Laurie Laird, Freddie Gray, thank you both very much indeed for your analysis this morning.
Now, joining us live from Hazelmere in Jeremy Hunt's constituency of South West Surrey is Ellie Costello, who's speaking to residents there.
Stand by. She's going to be there in just a second, I believe. Why don't we read some views whilst we establish that line to Ellie? Because lots of you coming to us with your thoughts on today's autumn statement. Gareth says, I definitely think that it won't just be people that go overseas to avoid heavier tax. Companies and businesses that can are also likely to move to avoid paying high tax. Let's just ask quickly Laurie's thoughts on that. Do you think there is a risk of a brain drain in all of this?
I think that when you're consistently changing tax policy, less so a brain drain, but it's difficult to entice business here. And when we've talked so much about the corporate tax rate, should we bring it up? Should we bring it down? Business doesn't care that much about the absolute level within a range. They care about some degree of predictability, knowing what the tax rate is going to be year after year after year. And there is a risk that by fiddling with the tax rate, and look, we're only 2 years away from an election.
It could be changed all over
where
again.
everything could change again. That's concerning for business.
OK, Laurie Laird, thank you very much. I'm told Ellie Costello is now there for us. Ellie, sorry about that. I had a few problems with you. But you are in Jeremy Hunt's constituency of Hazelmere. I'm hoping we can see you. Hello. What's happening in Hazelmere?
Hello, good morning. I hope you can see and hear me now. We've just stepped into Oliver's Cafe, which is on the high street here in Hazelmere. It's been very cold and very rainy here today, so we're seeking shelter. But this is Jeremy Hunt's seat. He's been an MP here since 2005, and I think it's fair to say he's quite popular here with residents. I've been here a few times before, but he is the man of the moment, and all eyes will be on Jeremy Hunt at around 11:30 this morning as he steps up to the dispatch box to give his autumn statement. But this isn't just about politics. This is about people who are looking at their bills at the end of the month and thinking, how are we going to make ends meet? So I thought I'd come to Hazelmere today and find out what people are hoping to see in that autumn statement. So we're starting with Mr. Oliver Leach, who runs Oliver's Cafe, where we are now, a very popular business in the local community. What are you hoping to see and hear in the autumn statement today?
For the hospitality, we would love to see a reduction in VAT or any support, as the hospitality and retail is really suffering at the moment. So any help there would be amazing. Personally, what I would like to see, the NHS and mental health protected, child benefits protected, that type of thing. But who knows?
Now, Jeremy Hunt has warned previously that he had to make eye-wateringly hard decisions. So how are you feeling about this budget? Are you feeling nervous? Are you feeling potentially hopeful? There has been some sense, some clue that there might be some help with energy bills.
I think there's some hope there. I think there's some hope that Jeremy and Rishi give some stability to the markets. But I think we all realise now that it's going to be a really tough kind of 6 months to a year. But I think that would be important to know of how long. We know things are going to be tough, how long that's going to go on for.
And you have met your MP, Jeremy Hunt, a number of times. Now, he hasn't been in the post very long. He doesn't have any previous experience at the Treasury. How are you feeling today ahead of this autumn statement? Do you have faith in Jeremy Hunt?
Well, in his position, so far, we can say so good. So far, he's added stability to the markets, and it would just be interesting to see what he can do to help us.
And in the hospitality industry, are you getting a sense that people may struggle to get through the winter? Are you already sensing that there are people who are watching the pounds in their pockets and perhaps not coming in for their slice of cake or their coffee?
We are, yes. November is always a little bit of a difficult month for hospitality with the roll up to Christmas, but already we are seeing a drop in average spend and a drop in footfall.
Oliver, really good to speak to you this morning, and I hope that you hear some good news in the statement for you this morning. Well, lots of people will be anxiously waiting for that autumn statement at around 11:30 this morning. We know that inflation is at 11.1%. Energy bills are through the roof. The war in Ukraine is raging on, and people are really hoping that there's some good news. Potentially might not be, but they are feeling nervous for this statement in a few hours' time.
OK, Ellie, perfect. Thank you very much indeed. Well, look, from a cafe, we're going to look at another business now, aren't we? That is the issue of landlords and pub owners who are very closely watching the autumn statement today, hoping that the squeeze on their industry isn't too tight.
Yeah, now 50 pubs, 50, close every month, according to the British Beer and Pub Association. And Liz Truss was going to cancel the increase in pub beer duty, but I think that's probably not going to happen now. Our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, has more on the plight of the pubs from Derbyshire.
We'll get back to the site, mate. We'll backfill that trench.
Like many builders in Belper, Joe's partial to a pint after a hard day's work. But now the cost of living is squeezing his social life.
I've just been to the bar, got my friend one. It was £9 for 2 pints. You know, you should get 4 pints for that back in the day. So it's double the price in my eyes. I don't understand how people can afford to even go out and have a drink if you're not earning good money at the minute.
At the Devonshire, pairing good food with great beer has meant success for Martin, who owns 4 pubs in Derbyshire. But now he's facing rising prices across the business.
Just had a price increase notification from Heineken that there's going to be a 13% increase in March next year. And obviously, we can't absorb any more, and that will be passed on. So, you're talking probably something like, another 20p on a pint in the new year, which we've had to do earlier this year already.
Costs are increasing everywhere, including the price of a pint in most pubs. That means fewer people are coming into places like this, and when they do, they're spending less of their money. It's an industry in decline. The Lord Nelson across the road closed a decade ago. Now 50 pubs shut every month, according to the British Beer and Pub Association. With the Chancellor's autumn statement due, the industry is once again poised to be pinched. Last month, Jeremy Hunt ditched a freeze in alcohol duty rates, which would have saved the industry £600 million in tax. Industry leaders want him to reconsider, but there's a £55 billion hole in the government's finances, and the Chancellor's filling it with tax rises and cuts to public spending. Back in the Devonshire, Martin says no matter the outlook, pubs still need some help.
A cut in VAT would allow us to retain some more profit. Money would stick on a bit better. I think we're all going to have to take a little bit of pain. That's the consumer, the business owners, right across the board. But I'm just hoping that it's not too severe.
The tax rises and spending cuts are coming, but it's unknown if they'll heal or only widen the financial wounds in British pubs. Will Hollis for GB News in Belper.
Well, the time's now 8:19. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The head of the MI5 has revealed that Iran's made at least 10 attempts to kidnap or kill British citizens on UK soil. Giving his annual threat update yesterday, he also warned that Britain should be prepared for Russian aggression for years to come.
And in the US, the Republican Party has won a very narrow majority in the House of Representatives. After all, it follows those midterm elections, which were supposed to be a red wave. more like a red trickle, but saw the Democrats retain the all-important Senate.
And the Met Office has issued 3 yellow warnings for large parts of the UK until Friday as the country faces atrocious weather conditions. Motorists are being warned to stay off the roads, with some cars being stuck in floodwater. Well, if our reporters out and about this morning are anything to go by, that bad weather has already arrived. Poor old Tom Harwood weathering a storm on Downing Street for us this morning.
It feels appropriate that the storm is raging above Parliament because the storm is going to break in the chamber when we get this really
metaphors.
unpopular budget.
It reminds me of when Liz Truss had to do loops in the car. Do you remember this?
I do.
The cameras were doing helicopter loops outside Downing Street because they wanted to do the podium arrival and they couldn't because it was so wet. So many analogies for that and indeed for today's budget. But we can take a break. After that, we're going to be talking to the man who auctioned off Diego Maradona's Hand of God ball. You think it's more hand of a cheat?
Hand of cheat.
Guess how much it went for?
It's ridiculous.
£2 million. Find out why it went for so much after the break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 8:25. Still to come on the programme this morning. At 8:45, we'll be asking, could psychedelics actually hold the key to treating depression? We'll be speaking to a researcher who's been looking to the therapeutic properties of, believe it or not, magic mushrooms.
Have you ever tried one? I think it's against.
I think it might be illegal.
It's against the law.
Have you tried one?
No.
No comment.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Definitely haven't. Well, I'm not sure that I have. And at 9:15, of course, we're going to be looking ahead to the Three Lions' first match in Qatar on Monday, and we're going to be talking to the former England captain, Terry Butcher, you and I know so well.
Well, he looks rather bloodied there, doesn't he? Which doesn't happen so often in football these days.
Yeah.
Anyway, he'll be looking a bit more clean cut, I'm sure.
And we
_9.
still didn't win.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's not a sign of what's to come in Qatar. Look, let us know your thoughts on all of the big subjects this morning. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
In just a few hours' time, the suspense is killing you, I'm sure, the Chancellor will deliver his eagerly anticipated fiscal statement. It's a budget, really.
Yeah.
One of the groups who look set to benefit are those on pensions.
And our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has been to Barnstaple in Devon to ask pensioners what they hope to hear from the Chancellor.
The great and the good of Barnstaple gathered together for a coffee, a moan, and the chance to keep warm. Tough times. But what's toughest?
The food. You go in the supermarkets or anywhere one day, it's at one price, and you go in there the next day, it's gone up. You just got to buy the cheapest things you can find. We don't get much. If the government lived on our pension, they'd be dead within a week. Lack of food.
Not surprisingly, it reminds them of the war.
Women cooked more. You didn't have the frozen stuff that you've got now. You know, I mean, mums are working now, so they buy the frozen stuff because they've got to go to work, so they want something that's quick to cook when they come home. And times have changed, haven't they?
But who do they blame?
And once it was COVID, they were blaming COVID. Now it's the Ukraine war, they're blaming.
Who do you blame?
The government. Yeah.
There's as many different viewpoints here as there are biscuits, but a common theme picked up by age concern across a myriad of coffee mornings and events: mental health.
They're getting very anxious, and of course, with a lot of older people, they are concerned for their children and of course their grandchildren, because they actually are finding financial difficulties. And if older people have a bit of money, they are looking at helping their families.
There's a stoicism too, a sense of keeping calm and getting on with it.
If I start noticing it and being affected by it, we are in deep, deep, deep trouble. Do I think they're efficient? Well, put it this way, I think probably the best I can say is they're doing their best.
These people have a list of hopes for today's fiscal statement, hopes for pensions, hopes for inflation, but most of all, a hope that once a plan is in place, we can look forward with confidence.
There's so much negativity around. I shall die of negativity. I'm struggling with, I've got that at home. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change.
Serenity, wisdom and courage, three qualities these pensioners have in spades. And with these traits, they say, they can survive whatever the Chancellor throws at them today and face the future with renewed confidence. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Lots of you getting in touch about that report a little bit earlier on. Sarah saying, I really resonated with the pensioners this morning. Let's see if those MPs could last on my pension. They'd starve as a fellow pensioner. I'm not sure what to expect. And Robert saying the pensioners from Devon, so down to earth and refreshingly honest on how hard it is for them financially and mentally. That from Robert and Sarah. Keep those thoughts coming in.
And after the break, we're going to be going through those newspapers with Liam Halligan, our very own Liam Halligan, and Baroness Claire Fox.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice, We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking. My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Well, good morning to you. Time is now 8:33, and let's bring you up to date with today's top stories.
As we've been discussing this morning, the Chancellor is to deliver the government's plan for stability and growth in today's autumn statement. Jeremy Hunt will unveil a £54 billion package of tax hikes and spending cuts, and he'll say the priority will be on protecting the vulnerable, but will also warn that difficult decisions will have to be made to balance the UK's books.
And 1 in 4 employers have seen an increase in staff being signed off with sickness compared to last year. This is according to new research. A rise in flu and COVID cases, as well as the ongoing impact of long COVID, are listed as the main reasons for that rise.
The NSPCC has warned that children face an increased risk of domestic abuse during the World Cup. The charity says that emotional stress, alcohol and betting on games could be triggers to incidents at home during the tournament. OK, it's time to go through the papers this morning. It's going to be an autumn statement-free paper review because we've covered it extensively throughout the course of the morning. We welcome back Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor, of course, and Baroness Claire Fox from the Academy of Ideas. Welcome back to both of you. Liam, you want to start, and lots of focus, understandably, on Donald Trump after his big announcement at Mar-a-Lago on Tuesday night. The Daily Star having a bit of fun with their headline this morning.
They certainly are. Orange man vows to conquer red planet, to boldly go bigly. The Star reporting that Donald Trump is apparently saying he's going to plant a Stars and Stripes on Mars, no less. And there's more follow-up to that Trump statement, of course, that he is going to run in 2024. Trump is 76. Joe Biden's 79. He's saying he's going to run as well. Remember Ron Reagan? He bowed out after 9 years at the White House when he was 78. But then you've got Her Majesty's son saying Donald Trump, with the producers of The Simpsons revealing that back in 2015, before Trump even ran to become president, of course, Simpsons was predicting Trump 2024. You had Lisa Simpson, you know, the clever one with the sort of head shaped like a star. She's the sort of high achiever. The Simpsons were predicting back in 2015 that President Lisa is about to lose to Donald Trump. And she says, well, President Trump, he's left us a big budget deficit, hasn't he? With a little sign there in The Simpsons saying Trump 2024. Truth is often stranger than fiction.
We can't land on Mars, can we?
I don't think we can land on Mars.
How's he going to
You'd be vaporised.
He doesn't worry about details like that.
How can you stand in the way of a headline like Orange Man vows to conquer red planet?
I just think it's a pity we didn't put him on Artemis 1 when it was launched into space. Bye-bye, Donald.
I think, in a way, you know, on the one hand, you could say, well, this is the kind of great vision. You know, man walked on the moon. That was a big step forward.
Yeah.
Let's go to Mars. Completely unrealistic, as you've pointed out.
Yeah.
As an aspiration, nothing wrong with that, right?
No, right.
But I do think that what we really need to say is that I fear that Trump has lost his populist touch.
Yeah.
Right? I think that one of the things that I'm worried about is that the populist discontent that brought him to power, those important insights that we had about what huge millions of people in America felt have not been resolved, but Trump no longer captures it. You know, and he's clinging on in lots of ways. And I think that he was exposed as a hollow vessel. He was the vehicle through which people expressed their discontent with the Washington elite and the technocrats. But when he got there, he didn't quite live up to it. And then subsequently, and we can see this, he's having waning influence, but he won't let go.
He's going to be trumped, though, himself, isn't he? See what I did there? By the Florida governor, don't you think? Ron DeSantis, who's probably going to stand in the Republican primaries. I mean, does Trump still boss the Republican Party nomination? He thinks he does. But I'd say after those congressional midterms, where a lot of Trump-supportive candidates didn't do as well as expected.
No.
It may be that his crown is slipping.
Yeah, look, his crown might be slipping, but I think all of the people that are trying to compete for that crown are going to try and mimic him in some way. So even if it isn't Trump himself, I mean, we've seen it, you know, even manifesting itself here. Yesterday, we had Angela Rayner during PMQs talking about draining the swamp. Yes. Well, that was his phase.
Yes, I know, but that is because actually Trump did represent something important. I think that Angela Rayner understood that, which is that she was basically... I mean, that draining the swamp point actually did understand that if you've got a political elite that's full of people who only talk to themselves, right, a self-aggrandising group, that can actually clog up the business of representing ordinary people. Angela Rayner cleverly understands that that's a way to go for the Labour Party, because the Labour Party have lacked any kind of connection with ordinary working people in this country for so long. She was appealing to that moment. So I don't think that... It's not a question of aping Trump. Trump carried a moment historically in American politics of breaking the mould of a closed group who basically never gave a damn for millions of American people, and they expressed themselves via Trump. What I'm saying is I don't think he's the vehicle to do it any longer.
Interesting.
I wonder if he doesn't get the nomination, if he stands as an independent, because I don't think he'd care.
A sort of Ralph Nader party
I don't
candidate.
think he'd care if it tore down the Republican Party.
I
He cares about...
It depends how loyal his base is to him personally, or the idea of, as Claire says, of a Republican nominee who can get beyond the Beltway. I mean, Angela Rayner, she's a really canny politician. She's watched the Democrats in the UK, in the US, centre-left party, disastrously under Hillary Clinton, you know, lose their connections with those Rust Belt voters.
Who she called deplorable.
That's right. That's right. And Angela Rayner is trying to re-link the Labour Party with the Red Wall and ordinary people in a way that the sort of Islington tendency within Labour, of which Starmer's probably a part, will never understand.
And neither will Rishi Sunak.
Indeed.
No.
With his pink loafers turning up at G20, how much did they cost?
What was that outfit about?
I know, it didn't work, did it?
I know.
It sticks in the core of a lot of ordinary people trying to pay their bills.
Yeah.
That you're seen wearing very, very... You know, we want our Prime Minister to be smart, but you can get an off-the-peg suit from Next, or other suppliers are available.
It's
Well, he
interesting
didn't look smart.
No, but it's interesting how many times Labour MPs, when they stand up in the Commons, manage to use the expression non-dom, because subliminally they're wanting to remind people that Sunak...
And there was a line in one of the papers that Rishi Sunak will, of course, publish his own tax return, but his wife's tax return will be kept private, even though she is no longer, we're told, non-domicile, that kind of elite tax status. But international folk who are living in the UK, they pay tax on their UK income, but not on their worldwide income.
Yeah, because all his investments...
Completely legal.
Yeah, because all his investments are now in a blind trust, so he doesn't know how they're doing. But I imagine his tax bill will be pretty big, because I imagine that blind trust has got a lot of dosh in it.
Should we talk, Claire, about a ticketing website now? This is inside the Telegraph. Eventbrite accused of a campaign of cancellation against women.
I think this is an incredibly shocking and underreported story. Every grassroots organisation uses something called Eventbrite to sell their tickets. In a way, it's kind of liberated and democratised who can have a meeting. You don't need a box office, you can sign up to Eventbrite. What's happened is they have just cancelled an event which was organised by Women's Place UK, which had Julie Bindel at it, and Karen Ingala Smith was launching her book, which is about women's spaces, and they've just cancelled it and refunded all the tickets, right? You think, God, that's extraordinary. They say that it breaks their hateful, dangerous and violent content policy. That's the Trust and Safety team. This is on top of them cancelling the events for a Nottingham screening of Adult Human Female, and Sarah Phillimore, who's a barrister, and Graham Linehan had an event on a gender-critical book called Transpositions, and they had their event cancelled. Now, what this is the corporate politicisation, cancelling events and basically censoring some events that are gender-critical. And the reason why it's against women is because these are women's rights campaigners who are saying that transgender ideology is undermining, for example, women-only spaces.
Yeah.
It is so frightening because PayPal did something similar with Us for Them and for the Free Speech Union, where these companies that appear to be neutral use their terms and conditions to politically decide what events can happen or not. And I really hope...
But who's got to a company like Eventbrite? I mean, what woke tendency is on the board or something?
The Trust and Safety team is obviously rather woke, and there are people, as we speak, who have got pictures of the people who work for that team, calling people TERFs and all the rest of it. It's also the case that, by the way, Eventbrite are, perfectly reasonably, selling the tickets for very, very many gender identity and quite woke events. They haven't cancelled those events. So it's a very particular targeting of gender-critical events. I just think it's very important to understand that these people have more power than you'd think in today's climate, a group like Eventbrite. I think that their discrimination, because it is discrimination, should not be allowed. Sarah Phillimore is actually going to sue and take out legal action. And as she's a barrister who works at the Bad Law Project, you know, she seems to know what she's talking about. And I hope that that's... I don't like going to the law courts, but I really do hope we can have some clarification that they can't... This is discrimination against women. In the old days, we used to call that sexism, right? And we have laws against discriminating. So discriminating against somebody's lawful views in this way seems to me to be very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating, that whole argument. Interesting to follow that one. Liam, a story we've been covering for a few days now, and drew my attention when last week we had an egg being thrown at the King, and I thought, can't waste eggs in this day and age. But the fact that it's making the front page of the Daily Mail is in and of itself a sign of how serious this egg shortage could end up being.
Indeed. Ukraine is a huge source of egg production across Eastern and Western Europe. Why? Because Ukraine produces lots of grain and barley and other pulses, and it's what you feed chickens on. You need space to set up chicken egg rearing farms and so on. And we get the sense now that supermarkets are rationing eggs. Eggs are being rationed, says the Daily Mail, amid bird flu concerns and soaring production costs. Asda started limiting customers to 2 boxes, while Lidl has imposed a 3-box rule in some stores. This is no joke. Eggs are a very, very important source of cheap, reliable protein for lots of families. You know, go to work on an egg. That was the advert when we were kids back in the 70s, when the economy was kind of feeling like it is now. Why? Because eggs are cheap, are readily available, are fresh, easy to prepare food for vulnerable families. And yet it seems now, partly because of the war in Ukraine, but the combination of that with bird flu as well means that egg production is being curtailed. So you've got discounter supermarkets that will sell a lot of eggs having to ration to make sure that there are some available for the bulk of shoppers. It's a really worrying thing.
Do you think bird flu's had the coverage it ought to have had?
I don't, actually, and I think it's partly because of the media's absolute exhaustion with these health issues off the back of the COVID pandemic. I think there's... But also the excess deaths that we read about, if we're really paying attention, in the aftermath of COVID lockdown, whether or not they're linked to COVID lockdown, the so-called collateral damage, the very issues that this long-awaited public inquiry into the lockdown should be focused on, and yet we're not talking about it at all. I mean, I think if we didn't have this ghastly conflict in Ukraine, if we didn't have this cost of living crisis, the likes of us four on this panel would be talking about that public inquiry every single day, because the public wants to know why we were locked down, what the implications were of lockdown, without pointing fingers and attributing blame. I don't think that would be productive. We need to understand how we're going to deal with the next one as and when it comes along. Are we going to instantly lock down the whole economy, or are we going to go for a more discretionary shielding approach? We're not talking about any of it.
And all the more reason the timing of that inquiry is why Matt Hancock was such a fool to go in the jungle.
Although, I just have to say that although I predicted that he would make a complete fool of himself in there, guess what? He's becoming quite popular.
I know.
I mean, it's a low bar.
Are you going to go in the jungle, Claire? I can see you eating various...
Under no circumstances.
You can declare yourself vegan like Boy George. You don't have to do the Bush Tucker trials.
When the eating trials come on, I'm a Celebrity, every year I have to turn over. I watch it every year, but I can't watch the eating trials. I've got no...
I still think he'll be one of the first to go.
He might well be. I'm just making... Anyway, of all the important stories...
His girlfriend's gone to Australia now, hasn't
she? She thinks he's
not going to last.
She's about to catch him.
There was a video doing the rounds. I mean, as if we haven't all seen too much Matt Hancock, just with him booty grabbing, as it's been dubbed, with Gina inside the Commons. But yesterday there was a video doing the rounds on social media of him trying to dance inside the Commons, and I couldn't stop watching it. And I was like, my eyes. I mean, he couldn't. It was terrible.
But I'm saying that because he won all the stars, and some of his critics in there have come over as rather surly, even though I would be one of them. And then when they've done the trials, they haven't won the stars. The problem is that we're judging Matt Hancock on the terms of how he's doing in the jungle. And the point about the inquiry is that we need to judge all of the politicians, because Matt Hancock is not the only one to blame for decisions they took. And I think the point about the bird flu issue is that actually people don't want to have another health panic.
That's right.
I mean, you can understand it.
We're exhausted.
Everyone doesn't want to think that maybe this would be bad for the health. Seriously, though, bird flu isn't bad for human health, except that eggs become inaccessible and expensive in the way you
And eggs are very good, as you say.
And they're good for us.
Yeah, they are.
Lucky people who have their own chickens.
I'll miss my boiled egg in the morning.
Well, they haven't gone yet, right?
No,
Did you bash it with a spoon, or did you cut the top off with a knife?
No, bash it with a spoon.
I love that it's softball.
It's an Irish thing to cut the top off with a knife. And also, my Irish, you put butter in your egg.
Of course you do.
Salt in your egg.
But
can I just say, I love the fact that those who are being rationed are only allowed to take 3 boxes.
I know, I noticed that as well. I was thinking
that's a single omelette.
Plenty. I'm we fine on 3 boxes. Liam Halligan, Baroness Claire Fox, it's been a pleasure this morning. Thank you very much for reviewing our papers. OK, the time's coming up to 10 to 9. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour.
The Chancellor's been urged not to raise fuel duty in his autumn statement. The RAC has warned Jeremy Hunt it would result in higher inflation and put even more stress on already squeezed household budgets.
The head of MI5 has revealed that Iran has made at least 10 attempts to kidnap or kill British citizens on UK soil. Giving his annual threat update yesterday, he also warned that Britain should be prepared for Russian aggression for years to come.
In the United States, the Republican Party has won a narrow majority in the House of Representatives after all. It follows those midterm elections that many predicted would be a red wave, more of a trickle, which saw the Democrats retain the Senate.
Now, a new study has suggested that magic mushrooms may be able to alleviate depression in almost a third of patients.
So could we see them used more and more in medicine? Joining us today is psychedelic researcher Henry Whitfield, who has his own experiences with treating patients with magic mushrooms. Morning.
Just first of all, morning. Bring us up to date on what the rules are in terms of legality with all of this. I mean, are you... we hear about microdosing in the States and we hear about other countries using mushrooms perhaps in some of this. Are we allowed to do that medicinally here yet?
No, in most countries it's still completely illegal. There are certain universities that have had to work really hard, and in this country, for example, I think it's taking many years to just get a license to do the research. And of course, for personal use or to run a retreat, it's still completely illegal in most countries. There are a few exceptions, like the Netherlands, Jamaica, some smaller countries. In the United States, next year in Oregon, finally there are going to be some magic mushroom therapy centres that can open legally, but it's still very rare.
How do you know what's a magic mushroom and what isn't?
Well, yeah, I believe there are over 100 different mushrooms that have this kind of psychedelic effect.
Right.
And there's a famous mushroom expert, Paul Stamets, and what he says is if when you break the mushroom it's blue, then it's very likely. I think he even says he hasn't found one that wasn't psychedelic when it had that blue colour to it.
This is a whole fascinating area of the use of drugs and treating sort of mental health. And we've talked in the past about MDMA being used in the treatment of soldiers coming back from war who are suffering with PTSD. I find it fascinating that this could be used to help treat people with depression. I mean, what would be the reality? Someone who's, going through a tough time and, seriously suffering with depression, are they going to be hallucinating, giggly, hysterical? I mean, what would be the lived experience of someone with depression being treated with magic mushrooms?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It varies a lot. People can have an experience of just intense love and connection. A person might also be able to... Part of, I think, how it helps therapeutically is that you can access difficult feelings. I think the reason why people... one reason we end up with psychological issues to begin with is because we're not willing to feel certain feelings. We block our feelings that we don't want to feel. So a person might feel a grief that they never allowed themselves to feel before, say they lost somebody, or if they were traumatized, the fear that they felt during a traumatic incident, they might be able to feel that more. So it can be either end of the scale.
So, I mean, that sounds dangerous in itself, doesn't it? I mean, I can understand the advantage of accessing traumatic emotions to try and rid yourself of them, but the idea that somebody would be perhaps doing that on their own, or, I mean, do you have to be supported through this treatment?
Yeah, very much so, yeah. All psychedelic researchers, people who run psychedelic retreat centres, they would all agree that it's not really... We would not recommend doing it on your own, because especially if you're vulnerable anyway, then it's going to bring up what's there for you.
Mm. What about you personally? Are you an advocate? Do you ever take them yourself?
Yes, I have.
Right.
What type? Any ones that people have heard? I mean, what's the medicine? Is it called Wanaka, the South American drug, where people sort of witness their own births whilst they're taking it? Is that a magic mushroom, or is... I'm just coming up with names now.
You mean Wachuma, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Is that a mushroom?
No, that's a cactus.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right. But what about... What did you take?
Yeah, I've taken mushrooms. In the Netherlands, you can buy mushroom truffle. So the truffle is the part of the mushroom that grows underground.
Right.
And you can buy them in a high street shop, a smart shop.
And this is your retreat we're looking at pictures of. So people actually are taking them collectively. This is an experience where people take them together.
Yeah, so a lot of people in the psychedelic research world I kind of believe that in the future, as this becomes more accessible, it's likely that it'll be done in groups because it's more cost-effective that way. Because in the big studies, like the one that just happened, that was just published very recently, they have 2 therapists for each individual, which of course could be prohibitively costly.
Right.
But when you do it in a group setting like that, you have the group effect. We learn from each other. People can inspire each other. If a person is able to feel a grief or something that's difficult, then if your neighbour is doing that, that can make you feel, oh, maybe it's safe for me to do that as well. So that can be
And can I ask you, is it expensive to do that? The group therapy?
It's still relatively expensive, yeah. I mean, some retreat centres, they charge, I think, up for a 4 or 5 day retreat, they might charge something like 4,000 or 5,000 euros, I believe.
Ooh,
which is pretty expensive.
And just quickly, because we are out of time, if people feel benefits to their depression, is it in that moment only, or are there lasting benefits?
Yeah, this is the thing that interests me the most, actually. As a researcher, how do you make the effects last long term? Because we know that sometimes a lot of people can relapse after about 6 months, but from a psychiatric point of view, it's already a massive breakthrough. If from just the recent study that was published, just 1 dose, already at 12 weeks, a lot of people still had lost their depression symptoms.
Interesting.
Fascinating. Well, I think it's a long time before it will even be considered acceptable here in the UK, but really interesting to hear these arguments. Henry Whitfield, psychedelic researcher, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, stay with us. After the break, we're speaking to the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, what he makes of what we expect to be in the Chancellor's autumn statement later today.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Chancellor says Britain has to face into the storm as he prepares to unveil the biggest package of tax rises and cuts in spending for at least a decade.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. It's Thursday, the 17th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Jeremy Hunt's going to lay out £54 billion of tax rises and spending cuts in that autumn statement this morning. He's going to tell the Commons difficult decisions are being made, but they will be based on compassion.
The package is predicted to cause unrest amongst those Tory MPs who supported Liz Truss's growth agenda. We'll bring you analysis of that statement throughout the morning.
And the head of MI5 has revealed security services have foiled at least 10 attempts by Iran to kidnap or kill British citizens in the UK. This news comes just days before England are due to play the Islamic Republic in the Football World Cup in Qatar.
And the countdown to that World Cup is, of course, underway. Ahead of England's clash against Iran, we'll be speaking to the former captain, Terry Butcher, who was part of that infamous Italia 90 squad who lost out, of course, to West Germany in what became the first of many painful penalty shootout exits.
Don't forget you can get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
So it is our top story today. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is to present his autumn statement to the House of Commons a little bit later on this morning, telling MPs, and indeed all of us, Britain must face into the storm as he unveils a £54 billion package of spending cuts and tax rises.
The Chancellor is going to say difficult decisions have to be made. The wealthiest must bear the heaviest load.
Well, let's speak now to the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, about all of this. Look, this feels a lot like a sort of Labour autumn statement, doesn't it?
It does. More taxes, spending cuts at some point, kicked on into the future. I think Team Sunak think that today is going to be a really big day for them. They think that they've sort of set the mood music. It's going to be gloomy, but everybody's braced for it. The markets and the experts will look at the OBR forecasts as they come out at the same time as the budget and think, actually, no, things could. There's sunshine on the horizon, and then they'll sort of bring the party together, bring the cabinet together. Even I think that's a bit optimistic on their part. I think not only are the public very increasingly depressed by this government, the various factions of the Tory party are not coming together. They are unhappy about this, and not just the sort of Truss heads, who had a very different idea of what to do about the economy. I think a lot of people are starting to think, well, hold on, we're going back into a very different kind of economics that is not really Tory at all.
But did they have any alternative, given what happened when Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng did a very conservative
No, I think they had,
mini-budget?
the markets are terrifying. When the global markets turn on you, they can destroy a country, and there was a great danger of that happening to Britain. However, of course, this word overcorrection we're hearing a lot. I mean, is this an overcorrection? Are we becoming too gloomy? Are we not doing any optimism? And the Tories are thinking, are we giving Labour a great chance to be the party of growth and the party of hope?
Yeah, and of course, if you look at some of the polls now, Freddie, who'd have thought it? Labour more trusted on the economy than the Conservatives. We've not had that position since 1992 when the Tories took us tumbling out of the exchange rate mechanism on Black Wednesday.
Well, exactly. And I mean, remember when Cameron Osborne took over in coalition? Everybody felt that Labour had made such a mess of public finances that they would never be trusted again.
Yeah.
people might be saying the same about the Tories when Labour take over next.
What would Labour, do you think, be doing? I mean, we were about to speak to Pat McFadden, so we'll ask him that question. But, you know, what would they be doing to try and plug this black hole? Would they not even be trying as we go into a recession, which there's a lot of people are saying that Germany aren't bothering trying to balance the books at the moment. They're expecting a huge hit to their GDP, worse than we are. Is that Labour's position at the moment?
Well, Labour are talking about growth, which is an important thing to do. As Liz Truss knew, it's an important thing to do. They talk about green growth. They focus on that very much, which is a different kind of growth. But I think people are desperate for good news. And even if it's green growth, I think people say, well, at least that's something positive. That's something to focus on. That's something that we can look forward to in the future. And people want that from politicians.
And we know they'll go for eye-catching things like the arrangement for non-DOMs.
Yes.
That'll be scrapped, probably.
Yes.
Although Labour didn't do it in 13 years in power because Blair was of the view non-DOMs bring a lot of money into the country.
Nice little dig at Rishi too.
Of course it is.
Well, that's the main driver, surely.
But also they'll talk about tax bans for small businesses, and that's something that's really important for the economy and for people, you know, for not the big corporate entities who go to COP summits. It's things that really matter for at the lower end of the economy, and that's very smart politics.
Well, Freddie, if you can, why don't you stick around, because we've actually got now Pat McFadden from the Labour Party, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. We can perhaps get some thoughts from you afterwards. So let's put some of those thoughts to you. Look, you've talked a lot in recent weeks about non-DOMs. You want to raise $3 billion by closing that loophole, but we suspect there's a bit of politics at play, that this is really about having a dig at Rishi Sunak, because Tony Blair, as Andrew's pointing out, had over a decade to do that, and he didn't. And all the evidence, certainly, and that was Tony Blair's view, is that actually just sends those wealth creators overseas. It happened in France when François Hollande tried it.
Well, on that specific policy, we think it's the right thing to do, because it's a 200-year-old break, and it allows very wealthy people effectively just to pay a fee in order to decide in which jurisdiction to pay their taxes. But that's only one part of the picture today. The reason that we're having this statement today is really, I'm afraid, a testament to a longer-term economic failure in the country. We've had the short-term issue of that disastrous mini-budget in September, which crashed the economy, sent mortgage rates through the roof, caused the Bank of England to intervene and so on. And as Rishi Sunak admitted from the G20 conference in Bali yesterday, it caused serious damage to the country's international reputation. That's one factor today, but it's not the only one. We are the only G7 country not to have recovered our pre-COVID economic position. So while we're facing these global issues, we're doing so from a position of weakness, not from strength. And that's not just down to the mini-budget, that's down to a longer-term failure to secure economic growth on the part of the Conservative Party. And that's the slow burn reason, if you like, why the Chancellor is having to make yet another statement about tax rises and spending cuts today.
There's a £54 billion hole, isn't there, Mr McFadden, in the nation's finances. How is Labour going to plug that gap? Because most commentators who've looked at your figures say you come in at about 35, 36 billion. So where's the other 20 billion going to come from? Which taxpayer are you going to whack?
Well, what we've learned in recent weeks is the importance of financial stability. And you can't run away from that. And that's why every policy that we put forward, we always say how we're going to pay for it. When it comes to the kind of issue that we're facing today, of course, you wouldn't have this with Labour in power, because when we were in power, our record of economic growth was significantly higher, and that meant we were a more prosperous country that could fund our public services and so on without these kind of emergency statements. But if faced with today, we'd have two principles in this. First of all, to make sure that you don't start taxing working people unless you've exhausted other possibilities first, and that's where things like, can you get as much as possible out of the windfall tax without, for example, giving a lot of it back through investment allowances? Can you do something like the non-DOMs and so on? Can you chase down every penny of government waste? For example, over £6 billion lost in waste and fraud during the COVID years. They set up a special unit in HMRC to try and chase this money down, and then they disbanded it
So you've got to look at these things before you start taxing working people. But we do understand the need for financial stability, and everything that the Labour Party says and promises will be subject to that requirement, because we learned to our cost what happens when you disregard financial stability. It has destroyed the Tory party's reputation for economic competence, and it has been a big part of the reason why the Chancellor's having to come forward with an emergency budget today, the third budget this year.
Can I ask you, say every policy is funded, Pat McFadden, so how are you going to pay for scrapping the abolition of business rates, which is a huge sum, tens of billions? How are you paying for that?
Business rates will be replaced by a fairer business property tax that gets a better balance between our high streets and outdoor centres, something that keeps pace with how the economy's changed in recent years, and also gets a better balance between the digital economy and the physical economy, because right now a lot of the businesses I speak in local high streets like Wolverhampton, they're really suffering because they've got to pay their business rates whether they're making a profit or not, and they look at the digital world and they see an unfair competitive advantage there. It's really an analogue tax for a digital age. The government itself has been promising to do something about this for years, but they haven't done it. It's time to replace this with something that reflects the way the economy actually works today, rather than the way it maybe operated 30 or 40 years ago.
OK. Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Look, I could see Freddie shaking his head during that last answer. I mean, what did you make of that? Are we convinced?
Well, I think Labour are very good at attacking this government, and they should, but they do sound amazingly vague, don't they?
Very vague.
When it comes to... And well done for trying to pin him down on what actually...
Rachel Rees has made this a centrepiece. We're going to get rid of the business rate. We're going to replace it with what?
With something digital.
Digital and something fairer. Well, it's easy to say fairer, but what is it? There could have been an election a few weeks ago.
Well, this I think points to a global trend that I've been thinking about a lot this week in relation to the midterms, which is that voters don't like the Republican Party, they don't like the Democratic Party. Voters in Britain increasingly are looking at Labour and the Tories and thinking, neither of you are saying anything.
Politics is broken.
Yeah,
politics is broken.
And look, the reason Labour have got tremendous leads in the polls at the moment isn't because there's a great, huge outpouring of admiration and affection for Sir Keir Starmer. Most people say Sir Keir who? It's because the Tories have made such a horlicks of things in the last 6 months.
Well, and Labour, I mean, McFadden didn't talk so much about it there, but I mean, Labour's Green New Deal, do they think that plays well with the electorate?
Yeah.
I'm not sure it plays nearly as well as they think it does.
No.
All very interesting. Freddie Gray, Deputy Editor of The Spectator, thank you very much indeed for your insight this morning. Should we get another perspective on the upcoming autumn statement now? Rosie Wright is out and about for us. She's speaking with a mother of four about what she is hoping for today from the Chancellor. Tell us more, Rosie.
Yeah, a very good morning. Welcome into home. This definitely is the calm after the storm of the school run this morning. Val has very kindly let us come and sort of gate crash for a little bit. Very chaotic. You're running a business. You're also a mum of four, juggling your family's finances. How do you feel about how the economy's looking and the impact it's having on families like yours?
Bit nervous, a little apprehensive, because we obviously have no control over what is going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen, and you just want to keep everything going. You're trying to keep our heads above water, making sure it doesn't impact on day-to-day life for the family.
You are talking to your girls who are primary school and younger about finances and about how they can look after their things.
We are. We are preparing for things to get worse, so we thought this would be a really good time to try and train the girls into good habits. Things like turning the lights off when you leave a room, that endless battle. Things like don't get the loo roll and wrap it round and round and round and round and round and round and round your hand. Again, another battle. Things like don't overfill your bowl with cereal. You can have a second bowl if you want more. Just little things like that in order to try and train them in case we do need to tighten our belts, just that little bit beyond comfort.
And how are you and how have you already been changing your family's habits as you're looking at finances?
Well, because we do have the 4 girls, they are expensive. So we do things like we're part of a great community network here. We don't buy children's clothes, we get them given to us. And then as soon as we've passed them down through the 4 girls, we then pass them on to another family. So there's loads of people within our network who share things. We all share school uniforms. As soon as something gets too small for someone, it's put in a WhatsApp group, you take it into the playground in the morning and you just hand it over to another family. So there's a lot of stuff within the community that we're all doing to help each other, very much passing things on. We have changed where we shop. We now shop at Aldi. And even that, we've noticed a difference. That has gone up, even at Aldi, considerably. So things like telling the children, no, they cannot look down the middle aisle. We love the middle aisle. But no, they are not allowed down the middle aisle. And when they complain, they go, why? It's like, because I'm horrible.
And just very quickly, you're also running a business, walking tours, seeing fantastic movie sites in and around London. How have you seen that change as the people who want to do the tours are also looking at their income?
At the moment, that hasn't been affected. In fact, the numbers are still looking great. The James Bond tour is selling out every week. And we're there going, in November? So that's still brilliant. But we are aware that at the moment, people are still looking towards Christmas. They booked their tours sometimes months ago. They were paid for months ago. January, that is, I think, when we might see the effect of this, when everyone has had that big splurge of Christmas, and then they go, oh dear, tax returns are due, the heating's got to go up another notch, and I think that might be when we do feel the effect, but time will tell.
Thank you so much for letting us come in amongst the chaos. Of course, we'll get more detail, as you've been talking about this morning, on what kind of impacts there might be on household budgets, but also people's businesses when we hear from the Chancellor at 11:30.
OK, Rosie, thank you very much indeed. Goodness me, she's putting parenting, making me feel quite inadequate as a mum. She's got that covered, that mum Rosie was speaking to there. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, we're expecting the statement itself, I think, around 10:30 this morning. Who better than Alistair Stewart to bring you all the analysis and the excitement beforehand, because he's here at 10 a.m. live on GB News, and he's with us now.
How lovely to see you both.
Very good to see you.
Great also to hear people like the woman that Rosie was talking to.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
Because what we're going to do 2 things so that folk at home understand where we're coming from, both on GB News, television and radio, is we're going to try and set the store out before Jeremy Hunt gets on his back legs. And we're going to do that with people like Patrick Marland, who is a former treasurer of the Conservative Party, but no mean businessman either in his own right. Ali Mirage, who was Tory councillor, and can be a bit of a boat rocker, which I think is important because there are 2 sides to all of the arguments. And we'll be out and about with people like Rosie's guest to see what they're worried about as they try and balance their budgets and make ends meet. But once Jeremy starts, we'll shut up, because I think people will want to watch it and listen to it and make their own minds up. And then we will analyse it to death, as it were, and Liam Halligan will be here, as he was with you earlier on as well, to try and make sense of it. Because to me, it seems to me there are 2 central issues. One is the economics of it. Is there a black hole? Because a lot of people out there who say, no, there isn't, just let it tick along, it'll be fine and look after itself. Equally, if there is a black hole, is this the best way of really trying to sort it out? And as Freddie pointed out, Pat McFadden's kicking balls in an open goal at the moment for Labour, quite extraordinary. And thirdly, is it going to be a 45-minute suicide note for the Conservative Party come the next general election?
A lot of chancellors, by tradition, have a sharp drink just before they start, or it's even next to the...
William Hague was writing it about this week. It was his first job in politics was to top up the whiskey.
The Lord Lamont.
Yeah, on budget day.
Yes, so Ken Clarke was a big fan of that.
But they used to need 4 hours or so then. They needed 4 to 5. It was not so long anymore.
Gladstone used to have an egg and something.
I think he did. But Jeremy Hunt is quite early this budget, 10 in the morning.
Never too early.
I still suspect he'll have a snifter before he comes in the chamber. I think he's going to need one, because I think he's going to field some very difficult questions from his own side.
Yes.
Because there's going to be some very uncomfortable Tory MPs in the chamber this morning.
Well, and also Harry Cole's written a very good piece in The Sun about exactly that at the moment. And our own dear friend and colleague, Esther McVeigh, used Prime Minister's or Deputy Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday to make that point. You know, we're Tories, she said, and if you're going to be spending money on things like HS2 and this, that and the other, and raising taxes, she said, I'm not going to vote for any tax rises unless you start reining in spending. And that's more fundamental Tory belief.
I made the point too, Alistair, earlier in the programme, that Esther McVeigh, of course, was Jeremy Hunt, now the Chancellor's running mate, when he ran for the Tory leadership in the summer.
Yes.
She would have been his Deputy Prime Minister. And there she is now saying she's probably going to potentially vote down his budget.
Absolutely. And I think the other great irony of the day is that one of the other elephants in the room, and there are quite a few of them today, is the amount of borrowing that the lockdown necessitated and furlough and that whole period of the coronavirus. And who was Chancellor then?
Rishi Sunak.
It was the chap sitting on Mr Hunt's side.
Absolutely right.
Who I think is in the House very shortly talking about the G20 meeting.
And huge fraud emerged in that furlough budget and a lot of his other COVID schemes, and the money's not been recovered. And we're talking...
I think it's alleged fraud until it's actually gone through the courts, Andrew.
That's what it is. I'm telling you, we'll never see that money.
Talking about previous chancellors and you know how they used to get through. I mean, it's not technically a budget, is it? We're told that the thing that differentiates it isn't going to be a red box, but it is
absolutely
changing
in the olden days, which I remember very clearly, you used to have a budget in March, and then you'd have an autumn statement in October, November. And the basic difference was that the budget would tell you how the money was going to be raised, and then the autumn statement, it was almost logical in those days, would tell you how it would be distributed amongst amongst the spending departments. But the other rule in those days was that if you whispered a word of what was in the budget, because it was market sensitive and all the rest of it, it was a resignation issue. Now, I mean, if you pick up the Times newspaper from 2 days ago, it's basically there, word for word. So we'll be sitting here with our little check boxes, like budget bingo.
I think the Chancellor, I think he might have been Stafford Cripps in about 1948. He was walking in to deliver his speech. He spoke to a reporter from the Evening Standard, told him one thing that was in the budget. You got it on the back of the papers, which used to be called Stop Press. One fact from the budget. He resigned as Chancellor the next day.
I think
Days of honour.
Was it the price of fags?
I think it was.
I think it was.
Very
Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng tried that, didn't they, with their mini budget, and see how that worked out. We've been discussing this morning whether or not they'll be in the House today.
We're asking GB News viewers, if you spot them anywhere, tell us where they are, because we want to talk to them.
I have a feeling they're not going to be in the Commons today at all. Look, we've had so many views, haven't we, all throughout the morning on the budget. Everybody at home really engaged on this topic, perhaps, as you've been saying, because this ground has been laid so much over the last few days. Mel saying, questions that need asking today. How high does the Chancellor expect unemployment to go as a result of the rises in taxes? How many businesses does the Chancellor expect to fail as a result of the rise in corporation tax? How does he expect inward investment into the UK to drop as a result of the rise in corporation tax? So lots of really intelligent questions people have been sending in. Paula saying, in response to the build-up to the autumn statement due today, my husband stated, we're entering a neo-Dickensian age. I think he may be right.
A neo-Dickensian? Oh, well, that's Christmas past and Christmas future. Interesting, those points, particularly about unemployment rates and so on, that our viewers and listeners are asking, is that accompanying Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement stroke budget speech will be this vital Office of Budget Responsibility statement. And within that should be exactly those points that our lovely viewers and listeners are asking. Because at the heart of it is to say, if you do X, Y and Z, here's what should happen to the economy. And as Jacob Rees-Mogg pointed out the other day, the OBR's record of accuracy makes horoscopes look even better.
I know. You might as well look at Mystic Meg's stars, frankly.
Mystic Meg on the money supply. That would be good.
OK, well, you're going to be on air from 10 o'clock this morning, and that is it from Andrew and me now for today. We'll be back together next Thursday. Tom Harwood will be back with the briefing.
And I'm here with my own show.
And you've got your own show tomorrow.
12 o'clock tomorrow.
12 till 3. Don't miss it. You won't, but we shouldn't either. See you next week.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. A bit of a wet and windy one for much of the country. Do have Met Office yellow warnings in place, but brighter skies across parts of the south where we should see at least a little bit of sunshine. This area of low pressure brought wet and windy weather for many overnight. It's now heading out into the North Sea, but it's going to kind of curve back round and stick around across northern England and Scotland for much of the day. That rain also affecting much of the Midlands and parts of Wales. We do have Met Office warnings in place. Foggy start across parts of Northern Ireland and a cold start here as well, with temperatures below freezing. The rain will edge into the east of Northern Ireland through the day, and it's going to pep up across eastern Scotland with that wind just coming in from the North Sea. It's going to feel pretty grim. 9, 10, 11 at best and feeling colder with some sunny spells in the south. Could get up into the teens. We will see a few blustery showers across Devon and Cornwall through the day, but much of South Wales and southern England should be dry. Elsewhere, we'll keep the outbreaks of rain, perhaps easing over northern England and parts of the Midlands into this evening, but that rain is sticking around in eastern Scotland. So again, Met Office yellow warning in place here. That's in place for most of Friday as well. Perhaps not quite as cold as last night across Northern Ireland, but still with some clearer skies across the south. Temperatures well down into single figures. Well, we've got the cloud and the rain. Temperatures won't really drop too much overnight. It will make for another pretty grey day tomorrow across eastern Scotland. Again, further pulses of rain could cause some disruption. We may see by the end of Friday more than 100 millimetres of rain on the hills and mountains in eastern Scotland. So as I said, that could cause a bit of disruption. A drier day for northeast England, the Midlands, North Wales with some sunny spells. And again in the south, we might squeak up to 13 Celsius. Just a few showers again for Devon and Cornwall. So plenty going on over the next couple of days. Saturday starts chilly. At the moment, most places look dry and bright, but it will turn wet again from the west. And that'll rain will last into Saturday night.
The Chancellor has a problem. He's got £55 billion to find, and it could soon become your problem too. Tax rises and cuts could be coming, but where will the axe fall? Benefits and pensions, support for energy bills, or social care? To find out what it means for you and your family, the Chancellor's autumn statement live here on GB News today from 10 a.m.